it's not hard to figure out why 1 in 2, that's the stat right now, 1 in 2 dogs will die of cancer.
Since we're talking about aggression or resource guarding in working with reactive or aggressive dogs, what are your first steps? How do you access a case and decide where to begin with behavior modification?
I never try to convince anybody to do anything. It's always a suggestion.
Evan Doggett has always had dogs, but his professional journey into dog training truly began in 2011 when he adopted a rescue dog named Rush. Over the years, Evan studied directly under internationally well-known dog trainers. Evan's guiding philosophy is that dog training should be fun and enjoyable for both the dog and the owner.
I label myself, I've been on tons of interviews as stated, as a professional suggestionist. I barely consider myself a dog trainer. And we're often pressing the gas when you unintentionally when you're trying to press the brakes.
Many owners are curious about e-collars, shock collars, remote training collars, whatever you want to call it, and off-leash training. Can you explain how you teach people to use remote training collars responsibly, and what are some of the most common mistakes to avoid?
You can screw it up. I don't think that it's irrevocable. You can't change it if you make a mistake, and you will make a mistake. For sure you're going to make a mistake, just like you stepped on your dog's foot by accident.
And there's a lot of debate over dominance and pack theory. Your Doggett style program covers health, play, behavior, and even owner training in addition to obedience. Which often overlooked element do you find makes the biggest difference in a dog's progress, and how do you integrate it into a typical training plan?
So the thing that gets overlooked the most in a standard program, in my opinion, because I used to make those mistakes. I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and the first probably 7 years of my career was just focus on obedience, focus on, basic behavior mod, if you could even call it that, and move on to the next dog and move on to the next clients. And what was missing, and it was missing out of my own personal life, was the health component. And so we've all been there where you eat bad food, you're working on low sleep, you're in an unhealthy relationship, and you can't learn. You don't act nicely, right? I've driven across my country, Canada, a couple of times, and it's a long drive, and you just eat fast food the whole way. Well, by the time you get to the middle of the country, I'm from the East Coast, you're like cranky, and you don't want to talk to anybody, and you're honking the horn, and you're acting like a general New Yorker is what I would say, just generally.
Right.
No, but no, but there's a component missing. And then when you look at a typical dog's life, they eat the exact same food from birth to death, no variance, because they're dogs and dogs should eat dog food. But it's some of the most heavily processed food. It's ultra processed food with no variation. It's not hard to figure out why 1 in 2, that's the stat right now, 1 in 2 dogs will die of cancer, which is just absolutely heartbreaking. And those stats, you never see that in, a human study. Like, for example, there was a study with dogs where they took 3 groups of, wasn't Cairn Terriers, Welsh Terriers, I think, the little white guys. And they're really prominent with bowel cancer. It's like very genetically predisposed to this. And they did 3 test study groups, one where they just fed them kibble, one where they fed them kibble and took out 25% of that kibble and replaced it with orange vegetables. So, I don't know, name some orange vegetables: carrots, bell peppers, pumpkin, squash, whatever. Things
Why
that are
specifically
orange.
orange?
I don't know. I've always wanted to ask that question. Why orange? Why not orange and red? Or why not red? Maybe there were just more orange vegetables in season. I don't know. But there was a reduction of cancer in the 70 percentile, which is, you'd never see that with humans. And they did the exact same thing with test group 3 and did green vegetables. So spinach, kale, anything green. And it was a reduction in cancer by 93%, which is insane. 25% of the kibble removed, green vegetables. How easy is it to do that? And so once I started changing my training protocol to, people who come to me with a behavior and not be like, it's got to be the dog's health. Nobody asks that question. And sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge. I never try to convince anybody to do anything. It's always a suggestion. I label myself, I've been on tons of interviews as stated as a professional suggestionist. I barely consider myself a dog trainer. It's just, here's what I would do. Here's what I think you should try. And sometimes it's not the right suggestion, but that's okay because I've got loads of other suggestions that I could give you in order to try to get us from here to there. But in the early process of training someone, once they sign up and they know, I don't tell them we're going to do a whole refresh of your dog's diet because I don't know that we're going to, because I don't force anyone to do anything with their dog. Again, it's a suggestion. But as I start talking about these things, about adding fats, adding a little bit of vegetables, and just making it so easy that it's hard not to do. And then you start to see these changes even before we start training. The people will comment, geez, the dog's just a lot calmer. The dog's not barking as much. The dog's not as reactive. And I believe just because, I didn't do anything with the dog, I didn't even meet the dog in person, and they're already commenting the dog's like 25 to 50% calmer. It's, after this many years of doing that, another 7 or 8 years of implementing health first, I see undeniable changes. That's just better for everybody.
That's really smart, and I think I'm gonna have to incorporate it into my system because one of the first things I do is ask about the dog's health to make sure there are no medical issues. And I do stress a little bit about diet, but definitely not as much as you are. And saying that it's a suggestion is quite smart because when you tell somebody you need to do this, then what happens? You instantly get resistance and defiance. It's like in our nature. But
Yeah.
if you say, hey, in the morning I get up and I do this, you're owning what you do. And if somebody likes that, they can implement it into their own training without that resistance. Do you or are you a advocate for a raw diet? Because that seems to be very popular within the canine world. I do raw with my dogs, and every time I have them on raw, their coats are shinier. They seem like they have more energy, and that transfers quite a bit into the obedience. Are there certain things that you do initially in the beginning with the diet as far as how much they should do? Because you said you keep it really simple. Well, what are some of the things you do that keeps it simple, that gives someone, in a sense, no excuse not to at least try it?
So um, I've found it the hard way that if you're just like switch to a raw diet or something, that it raw to a lot of people, they just think immediately salmonella, right?
Right.
We're all
Yeah.
going to die of salmonella, and the neighbors are going to die, and there's going to be this another pandemic if I feed my dog anything raw. We often forget that like they're carnivores, and so by the end of the program, they're often feeding a raw diet as I do, or close to that, maybe even just a couple of spoonfuls of raw meat and whatnot, pre-made, or some clients are like, they go way off the deep end in a good way. Like they're doing veterinary formulated cooking for their dogs and then they've changed their diet, but that's not how I try to start. What I've found is the easiest thing to do that is no excuse and also the most relatable is most people are used to the concept of a multivitamin. It's the easiest thing you can do for your health. Just take this. There's not enough nutrients in our soil, and we're busy. We're doing this and that. Just take a multivitamin if you're every day, easy. And so, what's the equivalent of that for a dog? You can buy them or you can make them. And so, forever, a recent company reached out to me and they asked if I would, consider their product. And I'm still testing it, so I'm not even going to mention their name. But you can buy pre-formulated ones. But what I say is, and people really get into it, is you can take your leftover vegetables, right? So typically, like the ends of the carrots and the mushy blueberries and the whatever. And you just keep putting it in a Ziploc bag in the freezer. And then at the end of the week or the month or whatever, depending how many kids you have around your house wasting food, is you blend that up with some bone broth or even just water, put it in an ice cube tray, and then you've got a little multivitamin that you can give the dog. You can steam it, whatever, before you blend it. You can boil it and then blend that all up. And for those, like with people with families, that's the easiest thing. And then they just give their dog an ice cube every day. what I typically do is I'll give them that bit of information and a recipe for a dog multivitamin, right? Like a blender, same idea. You're blending up these foods, but maybe you, instead of waiting for the blueberries to go mushy, you just go and buy blueberries, right? And then you make this recipe, you make a smoothie, and then you put it in ice cube trays. And then every day the dog gets, 1 to 5 ice cubes, depending on the size of the dog. And then there's just no excuse. Like, it's so easy. And it's the same thing with fitness, right? If you tell someone, okay, get down and give me 100 push-ups, they won't even start. But if you say, let's do 1 push-up every day, it's too easy not to do. And then when you're down there, maybe you get 2 push-ups in, or 5. But our goal is just 1 push-up. Our goal is just 1 ice cube per day. And then it's the compound effect. Just like eating burgers every day, there's a compound effect to that. Just like investing, there's a compound effect with that. And it's the same thing with taking a little Doggie multivitamin, which again you can buy or you can make.
I'm sure they love the treat too. And
Oh my god, they go
there
crazy for it.
oh yeah, absolutely. Something that I used to do for my dogs as a treat. I don't do it too often because it's not the healthiest. It was more of a treat for them. But I would do mostly because the sugar is what
Yeah.
made it unhealthy. But I would do a mixture of equal parts peanut butter, pumpkin, coconut oil, and raw honey. And I would
Mm,
mix that up and stuff it into a work to eat feeder and freeze it and give it to them. Now, I used to give it to them quite a bit. And then I
yeah.
realized how much sugar I was giving them. So it probably wasn't the best. And now I just do it as a treat here and there. With looking at the dog's nutrition and perhaps diet and routine, you said that the dog's obedience will start to get better or their behavior issues might start to go away before you even start training with them.
Yep.
Have you noticed that this will sometimes fix the issues entirely, or does it still need a little bit of obedience training or behavioral mod dependent on the case?
It's been very rare that I've seen that nutritionally fixes everything, because the problem with that is that the communication between the dog and the human is still missing. The human
Mhm.
doesn't know how to properly interact with their dog. They're speaking a completely different language, which makes sense because it's a different species. I'll never forget. Um, Forrest Mickey said, who are we, like, who am I to, how did he phrase it? Something very philosophical, as Forrest would do. But it was like, who am I to assume what another species is thinking? And so it's so true that we think we're saying this to the dog, but oftentimes, unless you're a professional dog trainer, they're interpreting it completely differently, which is why they get excited when you want them to get calm, and they're getting angry when you're trying to stop them from being angry. And we're often pressing the gas when you unintentionally, when you're trying to press the brakes. But
What do you
for
think
some,
causes that? What do you think
what
is
do I
the
think
main
causes the
issue
gas
with,
and the brakes?
yeah, for most people within their communication with their dogs? What's causing that miscommunication?
They have no concept of body language, and that dogs, that's their primary communicator. And so you're posturing yourself in a way that is preventing, like think of just the teaching place, for example. So many people square up with the dog and then want them to walk past them. And the dog is like, you just put on the brakes. And if you just stand sideways a little bit and present an opening, the dog's going to go forward. Or you want the dog to come to you and you're facing the dog and you're, I don't know, so bending over the dog and you want them to come forward. But if you do the complete opposite and you bend down and turn away from the dog, they're most likely going to come to you. And so little things like that that are often the opposite in our communicating. I mean, we do so much of it with our face, which they also understand. So many people are
Mhm.
like, my dog knows what they did something. I'm like, just pull out a mirror. Like, everyone knows, everything knows you're upset. They don't, but that's why they keep ripping up the Gucci bag. And so, because they don't know why you're upset, they just know you're upset. And sometimes they do know why. And they're just, playing you, or they're bored, or you're missing some other fundamentals. But with nutrition, the things that I've seen make such a difference is, I mean, it's scientifically proven your brain needs fat. And it's also scientifically proven that kibble is a vast majority of kibble, if not all kibble, is deficient in healthy fats because it's burned away, right? They
Mhm.
put fat on top of it as a preservative and a flavoring, but then that stuff goes rancid if you just put it in a big plastic container and leave it in your garage. And I almost lost a dog due to rancid fats with a bag of kibble that already had holes in it when I before I purchased it. And so little things like that, his kidneys started to shut down. Beautiful little cane corso, or Kenne corso, sorry for all the corso people out there.
And that was
So, but
from Kibble?
nah, that was from Kibble, and
Was
the
the garage humid, or what was causing it, you think?
well, within a week, well, every time the air is exposed, every time the kibble is exposed to air, that fat breaks down, right? And so and starts to go rancid. And so um rancid fat is bad. And
Was
so
there a smell or something that
I
could
mean,
give
it was
someone a
like
heads up?
fish-based kibble, so, like,
It stunk anyways.
it stunk to high hell anyway, and so that's where there's nothing to give it away other than don't leave your kibble out. Like, take out a week supply of kibble and put the rest in the deep freezer, and that way the fat will stay, solid. Because every time you open up that bag, you're doing that, and then don't put it in a plastic container, because unless you're going to sanitize that plastic container every time, it's not designed to hold that fat, right? So put the bag in the container, keep the food in the bag, or take out a week's supply in a separate bag. And yeah, so everyone wants the economical version of buy the 600-pound bag of dog food that lasts 3 months, but and you can, but you have to learn how to store it properly. So just by adding fats to the dog's diet, their brain can function better. And if their brain is functioning better, they can pick up on the thing that you're teaching them faster, and then they actually retain it a lot longer versus just, I know how I feel when I have brain fog,
Mhm.
eating too much pizza or too many carbs or whatever. And it's just like, what's that word I was trying to say again? And versus a keto diet, or not even diet, just like balanced real food versus chemically enhanced Oreos and, and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
Earlier, you were talking about setting the bar low enough, not using those exact words, but having it to where it's something that someone can do right from the beginning without making a huge change in their overall daily routine. Before you start working with someone and you're looking at the diet that the dog has, how long do you want them on this new diet before they will start to see an actual change in the dog's behavior?
With most things, you'll see a change within about a week to 2 weeks, a week to 10 days. You often see, especially with certain supplements, like certain supplements to give a dog after desexing. You can see a change within 10 days. And I mean like a drastic change in their overall behavior. Like 25 to 50% calmer is the average report. How do you quantify that? I don't know, but that's what
Right.
the owners often say. They'll give me a number, and like, great, that many less barks or freakouts, or the dog
And
sleeping better.
And do you focus on one adjustment at a time to make it easier for the pet owner? So, hey, we're going to start with the diet. Let's see what that does. And then after a few weeks of doing that, what would be the next step? And how do you incorporate the new diet into the training routine? Are you
Okay.
big on using food rewards?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't like to jump right into a raw diet for a lot of reasons. But the big one is that if the dog's gut bacteria is off, that dog is going to blow diarrhea, and that person is never going to consider raw feeding ever again, because the crate and the walls and and then they jumped in the kid's bed, and it's an absolute nightmare for everybody, the dog included,
Yeah.
when they have explosive diarrhea. And it's just like too much or not enough fusobacterium. It's a type of bacteria that breaks down meat, and if they don't have it for whatever reasons, maybe they got antibiotics at some point and their gut was completely wiped out. Maybe they came from the breeder that way, maybe whatever. And so by slowly adding real food, it builds up the dog's gut. But we want to start training the dog right away with the most basic obedience, which you can do with kibble, which you can do with treats, while the dog is also getting these supplements. So that way, when I see the dog and the person for the first time, they both have a foundation. Because for a long time, I would meet up with people where they had zero information to begin with, Like they never saw, or they had a bunch of information from a bunch of trainers that was all conflicting. They're a mess. The dog's a mess. The dog's feeling like garbage. They're overwhelmed and feel terribly guilty and embarrassed. Most people are so embarrassed that the dog trainer is in their driveway. They don't want to
Mm.
tell people. They're the biggest fans of the world once it's fixed, but everyone feels at a core level like it's them. They're the problem. And yes, it's a relationship, but it's a different species. Your maternal and paternal instincts will only take you so far with a different species. If somebody dropped off an elephant in my driveway and was like, good luck, I would have no idea what to do other than basic animal training because I've dedicated my life to this. But I don't know I don't even know what an elephant eats. Probably the neighbor's tree. I don't know. And so it's the same thing with dogs, and I think we need to give ourselves a break. So I give them one of my online programs that's just basic food training, getting the dog to work for either all of their meal or a portion of their meal. And for some of those people, it's treats. I used to get them to do it with a raw diet. I don't even bother anymore. It's like, let's just get something else that's not going to cause a problem, like too much freeze dried liver. Let's get something else and start working your most basic recall with the dog on a leash in your house while the dog is also getting these things. So that way, before I meet up with them, they have an idea of what they're going to do. Even if they just saw a video 10 minutes before I showed up, their brain is primed for, okay, I've seen this and I'm ready to learn this lesson and hear it from my voice, which is, or in the way that I'm going to say it on that day, which is going to be different than the way I said it in the video slightly, but they're primed and they're ready.
And you mentioned freeze dried liver. When I'm working with dogs, usually I'll either use the dog's kibble or I do use freeze dried dog food when I'm working with the dogs.
Yep.
Is that something you would recommend using freeze dried? You said not too much, specifically the freeze dried liver. Or what is your strategy for these are going to be the treats, or this is going to be the food we're primarily going to be using in the training? Because as you said, using raw sometimes can be
Yeah.
difficult, which I've done. You just chop it up, you keep it frozen, but you have to get through it relatively quickly before it starts to melt.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your preferred option?
Well, freeze-dried food is probably like one of the best things. There's an American brand called Primal, and they come in these little pucks, and they can nibble it out of your hand. You can break it up into pieces, but it is very expensive. It's like the
Hmm.
most freeze-dried food is the most expensive way that you can feed the dogs. I don't like using the brand Smack because it's super high in bacteria. It's been proven test after test after test, so I'm not a huge fan of that. Freeze dried is great. Liver is super high in vitamin K, and too much of it, you're going to get diarrhea, but long term, you're going to have issues with the organs. It's just such rich food, and you got to think it's freeze dried. So, like a piece of liver that's, I don't know, an inch by 2 inches is actually much bigger, right? But all the moisture is out of it, and so it's all like if you've ever eaten liver, it's strong, it's intense, and that's what most predators just go for the things that we often don't want to eat on our own plates. They go for the organs and the brain and all kinds of things like that. And so I'm a big fan of using a high quality kibble, even for a raw fed dog, you know, giving them a little bit of kibble, one piece at a time, freeze dried raw, which is what would be my like favorite thing. But also like lung and tripe and all these other treats are great. One of the biggest changes that I've ever seen with a client without hardly doing anything was it was this little dachshund dachshund wiener dog, and this lady had three of everything. I think her favorite thing to do was to buy things, and including things for her dog. So the dog had like I don't even know, maybe 25 dog beds. Like it was it was a situation we walked into. Anyway, she had an entire IKEA um, cabinet, like 3-level cabinet of treats. And I normally record absolutely everything I do, and I recorded the rest of the session, but I'm kicking myself for not recording that. It almost honestly felt too personal because it was a dresser of treats, and we had three piles: throw, give away, and keep. And the keep ones were the freeze rides, the all naturals. But this dog was eating just the equivalent of M&Ms and Smarties and Skittles and whatever. It was milk bones and this. And if your dog treat has more than 5 ingredients, you can probably throw it away. It's just too much salt, it's too much sugar, and it's just affecting the dog's behavior. We got rid of all the treats. The dog was getting 3 what are those cheese strings? The dog was getting 3 cheese strings a day. This is a dash hound. So like the dog is morbidly obese, right? It's getting all these treats plus food. It's eating the cat food. It's getting these treats. And she's like, well, I eat 3 of them a day and I can't eat one if he's not going to eat one. And so they both got, so they both got rid of them. She's like, I'm losing weight too. This dog training program is the best. Anyway, the dog did absolutely amazing, but she called me and it was one of those situations where I don't have a lot of, I don't know if it's patience or whatever. When someone calls me and they're like, if this doesn't work, I'm getting rid of the dog. And in most cases I've experienced, that means you've already decided this isn't going to work and you're getting rid of the dog. Now, that's not always the case, but I mean, have you experienced that? Have you had somebody say that to you and you already know they're not into it. They've already given up.
Well, I've gotten that quite a bit, but I don't know how much they are into it. I like to assume that their goal is to keep the dog. That's why they're reaching out. A lot of times it might be something that the owner is the one causing the issue. So
Sure.
one I had recently was 3 dogs all being fed at the same time and resource guarding issues. And I said, "Well, just start feeding them in their crates. Why are you feeding them together as a group to see how well they can do at something that's just not necessary?"
Yeah.
Because what usually happens with that, at least what I've seen, is if one dog does want to take from another dog, they tend to eat really fast so they can finish theirs and take the other dog's food. And then the other dog eats really fast because they're worried about dog A finishing theirs and coming and taking theirs. And if one does get fed up with it, then you end up having a dog fight, which was created on the inappropriate feeding process for those dogs when it could easily be fixed by putting them in the crate while they eat. And it's funny talking about resource guarding issues. From my experience, most resource guarding issues are caused by the humans, except for, let's say, resource guarding the human, which I guess it could be, of course,
Oh,
caused
that's
by the
definitely
human.
caused by the human. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Definitely.
in a sense where the other ones are usually created through the person trying to take things away in order to assert some sort of control or dominance before teaching the dog the concept of value transfer and making it a game. It actually leads me to another question since we're talking about aggression or resource guarding in working with reactive or aggressive dogs. What are your first steps? How do you access a case and decide where to begin with behavior modification?
I mean, I start everybody with health. It just has a few more questions, especially with aggression. What are what are they eating? When was the last when did they have antibiotics is a big one. Gut health plays a huge factor in it. Um, when was the last time you did blood work? You should probably get that done, a super chem and a CBC, complete blood count. What kind of flea and tick medication are you using? I don't know what it's like in the West Coast, but the East Coast is very prominent with ticks. There's a lot of fear around Lyme disease. Understandably so. Lyme disease is brutal. It does affect dogs and cats differently than it affects humans, in certain regards, as in like a lot. I would say most dogs and a lot of people are carrying Lyme. Again, I'm not a vet, right? Like I am. I don't take anything that I say as medical advice. This is just my experience, and I'm not even a dog trainer. I'm a professional suggestionist. So easy. These are just suggestions of things that I've done with my own dogs, and so a flea and tick medication, the edible one specifically, it's a different chemical compound than the topical one. And the way it works for fleas and ticks is um, it's a neurochemical that essentially is a neurotoxin. So it fries the bug's brain. And that can affect our dogs brains as well. It almost always does. And so this is information that I'm getting from very internationally well-known vets, Dr. Judy Morgan, Dr. Karen Becker. This isn't stuff that I've just decided, but also because I know some of these well-known, internationally known vets on a personal level, I get the stories, and I know this. Some of these people refer to me as the dog trainer, the vets, and just dog science people. And oftentimes we'll have these discussions about, is this a behavioral case or is this a medical case? And a lot of times what it is the dog, their brain is just completely, they're going through an epileptic issue with, they're not showing as epilepsy yet, but there is a neuro disruption there where happy-go-lucky golden retriever randomly becomes aggressive, right? Like that's not normal. You shouldn't expect that. Any sort of random aggression, like the dog is perfectly fine with you all the time, and then something happens and the dog will chomp onto your leg, or they weren't always the best with dogs, but now they're absolutely, like, from day one to day two, losing it. Oftentimes it's a health thing. And the most aggressive dogs I've ever worked with, the ones that are just always seem to be angry, like they're growling over this and they're agitated over this, and uh, whether they have a very strict life schedule or completely they're allowed to do whatever on the furniture, in the bed, eating, access to food 24 hours a day. Oftentimes those underlining, just what seems like an angry dog, they all have dental issues. Now, not all of them, but, like, if you've ever, I had a tooth go abscessed on me, I had 2 different dentists tell me, "Oh, I don't know what's going on with it." The tooth was rotting, and, I think I take pretty good care of my teeth, but there was something going on, and it was the root was dying. I was the most aggressive person. I was swearing and angry and in pain, but I could communicate to my family, "I don't want to kill you. I'm just in a lot of pain." But when it comes from a dog, you don't speak the same language. It's a different species. So with the real aggressive ones, I like to address health first. And sometimes the dog has just learned this behavior. It's practiced this behavior. It's been reinforced with this behavior. So with these aggressive and reactive dogs, it's like, let's take a couple of weeks re-implementing and restructuring the house and how things are being done, while also getting some of these other cases done. Now, if it's just dog reactivity, I talk about this stuff too, but we can get started a lot sooner versus, like, the dog is trying to kill me. Okay, well, let's make sure we can get a muzzle on the dog. Let's make sure we can do these other things while going to the vet. And the easiest thing, because a lot of people will say, "I can't take my dog to the vet." Well, we can sedate him, and yeah, it's going to be stressful for everyone initially, but, like, let's get all the things done. You can check the teeth, you can check the blood, you can do an x-ray. And this stuff does get expensive, but dogs are expensive. It's just a fact. And if this was a family member, which our dogs are, that just randomly started punching people, uh, you would take them to the doctor. You would do things. You would get some blood work done and see, are they bipolar? Are they this, that, and the other thing? And it's the same thing that we should be doing for our dogs that we're often not doing.
Yeah, and using the human analogy is, excuse me, is great. If I'm in pain from working out, or if you feel sick, or if you have a headache or a migraine or a toothache, you're absolutely right. You don't perform at your best. You might be grumpy and easily agitated. Why would it be any different for our dogs?
And you're probably going to tell your partner that, right? You're probably going to
Mhm.
say, "Hey, honey, I've got a headache today. Just so you know, I'm not mad at you. I'm just feeling bad." And I think it was Jay Jack that brought up the ICP conference. He said, it blew my mind, because I've never, like, as somebody who's super into health, he said, "Well, maybe the dog has a headache. Did you ever think about that?" And he just said it on stage, and I was like, "Oh my God, dogs probably have headaches." Like,
Right.
why, why wouldn't they have headaches? And you got somebody blasting Febreze all over the house and these Glade plugins. By the way, dear listeners, nobody likes your Glade plugins. Not none of your guests like them. Your dogs hate them. You're killing yourselves, and the house doesn't smell as good as you think it does. Please get rid of those things and stop buying them. They are just poison that everyone talks about you behind your back that you have 6 Glade plugins.
Right.
Let's get let's get rid of them.
And something else I wanted to point out, if doing something like changing the dog's diet, figuring out what's going on underneath the surface, it's going to make the training process easier. And for someone who's less experienced, the more we can do to make the process easier, the
Yeah.
better it is for that person with their dog. It's something that I explain to people with stay and train programs. If I take your dog for a month, I can get your dog to perform pretty well with me. But what I'm really doing is I'm setting the stage for this new communication system that we have, and where now you can communicate in a very clear and effective way. You don't have to go through the process of teaching your dog the communication system. You have to be able to just properly implement it,
Yeah.
which is significantly easier than the teaching process. So we need to make these things easier by breaking it down. Now, if you find out that, okay, let's say it was a medical issue, or maybe it wasn't, and the dogs passed it, or they didn't have to deal with it, do you start to look at what the dog's daily routine is? Is the dog getting enough physical or mental stimulation? And if you realize they're not, are there certain things that you like to suggest people to do with their dogs to increase the amount of physical activity and mental stimulation?
Most dogs are under exercised, and it's why I'm a huge fan of e-collar training because I understand that, maybe someone in New York City doesn't have access to run their dog off leash. I don't know. I've only been there once, but where I live, it doesn't take long. A couple minute drive and you can get out to the country. There are trails, there are systems that you can legally take your dog off. It's a very different thing, I think, in Canada than it is in the States, especially where I live in the East Coast in Nova Scotia. There's so much wilderness. And most dogs are just not getting that full spinal extension and cardiovascular challenge of getting tired enough to come home and actually relax, right? We're asking them to go for a little walk and, around the blocks, even if it's for an hour, especially if you just expect the dog to heal the whole time and not get to sniff and explore, or you just want them to sniff and explore and they're going at, a quarter mile of an hour. You only make it to your neighbor's house because the dog's sniffing the whole time. You don't get all those happy drugs that your body makes, right? There is no increase in dopamine and all of these wonderful things that your body produces that sustain one good solid 45 minutes of hard cardio lasts days and days and days of happy drugs in your body. And it's the same thing with your dog. So that's why I'm a huge fan of ultimately, let's get this dog or work as close as we can to get this dog off leash. And if that's not an option, how can we get their heart rate up high enough, long enough, so that way when they do come home, they chill. They calm down. They sleep better. My dogs are like in a deep sleep right now. They should be anyway, because we went for a big run. And on the days that we don't, I pay for it. They make me pay for it. And so exercise is like so fundamental of health. Even if you don't change their diet, it will be harder, but you can always add different types of exercise. And for some people and some dogs, that's getting that frustration out through playing tug, through chasing something, through doing the behavior that the dog was genetically programmed to do, that most people are like, "Oh, no, no, I don't want the pit bull to tug because that's gonna make make them more aggressive." Right? It's like, well, if you don't teach the dog, how to play tug in a constructive way, it's gonna find something to play tug with, and it might be your pant leg, it might be the couch cushions, but it's gonna do it. And so why not learn what really makes your dog happy? Your dog provides you with so much joy on a moment to moment basis just by existing. How about you take a little bit of effort and time and sometimes financial investment and invest that into your dog and your relationship with your dog to make them as happy as they make you?
Right. And people want their dogs to be happy. And there's a lot of science supporting that the pain and pleasure is connected in the brain. So if we push our dogs through good pain in the sense of running and exercise, it's what they call the runner's high.
Yeah.
The ice plunge for humans, not for dogs. I don't know if it works for dogs, but for humans, there's science that supports it. I've always, it's become very popular. The ice plunge, you see it all over. And if I see something that's popular, I want to know the science behind it. And what happens is your body goes through such extreme pain for those 3 minutes or however long you do it. Then for the next 6, 7 hours, you feel incredible.
Yeah.
And I can only assume that it's the same with our dogs. If we get them out, we get them running, we do what their body, of course, can handle, and we give them enough recovery time, they're going to feel better. They're going to be happier. They're going to be more content. And I think that's going to transfer over into the obedience. Now, you mentioned e collars. Many owners are curious about e collars, shock collars, remote training collars, whatever you
Mhm.
want to call it, and off leash training. Can you explain how you teach people to use remote training collars responsibly? And what are some of the most common mistakes to avoid?
It's something that I didn't want to talk about for a long time online because I didn't want people to get it wrong. And especially with social
Mhm.
media, everyone wants things to happen in a 7-second soundbite, and it's just not possible with e-collars because they are you can screw it up. I don't think that it's irrevocable. You can't change it when if you make a mistake, and you will make a mistake. For sure you're going to make a mistake. Just like you stepped on your dog's foot by accident, or you went right when your dog went left when they were on a leash and the dog hits the end of the leash and that made them uncomfortable. That's never your intent with that unless you're trying to teach them to avoid something. So with an e-collar, with a proper one, like I only use e-collar technologies. I would also recommend Dogtra as a brand because they come in different sizes and they come in different strengths of collars, but also the number variability is 1 through 100 with e-collar tech and 1 through 127 with Dogtra. And so I had to ask the people at Dogtra why 127, and it's just the degrees out of 360 degrees. That's
Mm.
that's all it is. So if you ever get a pop quiz at a trivia night, And so the mistake that I didn't want people to make, and it's why for years I didn't come out with an e-collar program, and I have one now. I just made it simple enough that people will actually watch the video because people will often skip to, oh, we'll just do it, and they don't want to know the theory or how to hold the thing properly or when and how we're using it. So as someone who has ADHD and is very like, yeah, if the video says any longer than 13 minutes, I'm not watching it. I can't. And so for me, it's all about making it for someone like myself. And then people without ADHD are just like, wow, that video was really fast. And so it's breaking it down in a way that I want to communicate that the sensation from the e-collar is coming from me, and then it leads to food, it leads to freedom ultimately. And so just like you would pull on a leash very gently, I can find that level that the dog feels at an extremely low level. And there's a bunch of videos of me on the internet of like, with no cuts where I hit the button without saying anything. My dog's in the field 100 yards behind me. She comes over. I take the collar off the dog. I put it on my tongue and hit the button. And I could barely feel it. I probably wouldn't put it on a cavity, but or my eyeball or something. But like, I definitely can't feel it in my hand. I'm putting it on my tongue. I'll put it on my cheek. I'll put it on my neck. And like most places, I feel it differently because the skin is different and the muscle is different, but for her, it's just enough. Now, if there was a porcupine over there, which is a different thing, her adrenaline is spiked to the absolute max because it's a little pit bull terrier mix from Costa Rica. She was a street dog, and uh, she wanted to kill certain things, and so in that situation, I'm going to use it as an adversive, so that way she doesn't end up with way more pain than an e-collar could ever provide, potentially lasting damage, quills to the eyes and things like that, or running across the road to get hit by a car and fatality. However, I'm never going to start with that lesson, right? So that way she gets to eventually have off leash freedom, and I have the reliability of knowing that I can always pull that invisible leash, and she will always feel that sensation because just like, and you can probably attest to this, people in combat situations or extreme situations, car accidents, time slows down, your hearing turns off, you get tunnel vision. When the adrenaline spikes that much and you go into a defensive, a freeze, or a predatory state, a forward moving state, you're losing a lot of your sensibilities. But that touch, when it's high enough, strong enough, will break through that mental barrier, that physical barrier of, yes, I can, in fact, feel this thing. And so, but the dog needs to know that it's coming from me and it leads to food. And so, in that methodology, in doing it that way, the dog doesn't get scared by this sensation. So it's not shock you did something wrong. Eventually you can get there to very much communicate no. However, and teach the dog to avoid things at the beginning, you want to just think of it as a gentle leash pull. And just like with a puppy, they don't know what that means. They're like, what is this thing on my neck? You teach them through repetition, patience, and pairing it with a positive that it's ultimately a good thing.
And when talking about operant conditioning, the four quadrants, positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative punishment,
Yeah,
positive punishment, adding something unpleasant to stop the repeat of a behavior. I think it's safe to say that most people assume that shock collars, especially when they use the name shock collar, is
sure.
just used as an aversive tool, a great dislike for something from the dog's perspective.
Yep.
But there's way more applications, of course, than just using it as positive punishment, which you hit on a little bit. Is that primarily what you prefer to start on, not just for the dog, but also for the human? Get them good at using it as a tool to communicate and not punish, get their timing down, get them comfortable with it. And then when it gets to a point, as you said, where we can condition it to know a condition punisher to predict the correction, using it as a tool to correct. When getting them started on a new tool, how do you use it as negative reinforcement or as a tool to communicate, not to punish?
Yeah, it's really in finding the dog's level, which is the trickiest part of conditioning a dog to an e-collar, because sometimes they have actual just muscle tension. You get it a lot with dogs that there's multiple dogs in the household that play rough, so they have physical knots in their neck. It's the same thing as when you go to
Mm.
the massage therapist and you're all locked up in your shoulder. They gotta push in deep to actually get that shoulder muscle to release, and that is those moments where people are like, I can't figure this out. I'm at 30 out of 100 and I don't have any response from the dog. Or I'm scared to go above 10 because I felt 10 and I didn't like it at 11. And therefore, I think my dog's not going to like it at 11. So, in that conditioning phase, I think is the trickiest part. But most people that come to someone like me or someone like you, they're already apprehensive of the tool because the
Mm.
purely positive training community has done such a great job of scaring people and thinking that we're just turning it to max, zapping the dog. The dog is screaming their head off, running away. Nobody wants to do that to their dog. Just, I mean, you pointed out, look at the name. If you use the word shock collar, if you just surveyed 100 people that didn't even own a dog and you said shock collar, good or bad, everyone's going to say bad because you're associating that with sticking your finger in a light socket. But there's no comparison. But if you took those 100 people and found their lowest level with an e-collar and you said, if I paired this with $5 bills or $10 bills or $100 bills, would you like this? Would you learn to like this thing? And they would all say yes. And you go, and then when you go to do something inappropriate, I could use the same thing to clearly communicate to you, like, I don't want it. I don't want you to do that. Especially if you speak Japanese and I speak Martian. Like it's going to make our communication a lot easier because I have no idea what you're saying. You have no idea what I'm saying, but I understand the value of money and I understand the value of physical pressure. Whether and I learned this. I've traveled all around the world. I've lived on 4 different continents, and it's physical touch and pressure is a very clear, understandable communicator that works really well. I hope that answers your
And do
question.
you, yes, and do you use the tone or the vibrate option on the collars, or do you just stick with either low level or working level stims?
Yeah, really good question. So there's certain situations where I'll definitely use the vibration and definitely use the tone. The the vibration with most collars, other than the vibrate only collar on e-collar tech, it only has one level. And so for most dogs, it's very startling. Everybody thinks it's a lot safer and easier and better option to do with their dog. But in my experience, the dogs initially get very startled by it. Three-quarters of the boys look at their bird and they go, "Well, what was that? Did that come from you?" And the girls look at their bum and they don't know where it came from. And so the dog gets very confused by it. And once they're confused and um, you've communicated too loudly or too much too soon, it's hard to then pair that with a positive because they're just thinking about what they're distracted by. But in that same vein, sometimes the vibration can be you can use it as a corrective, and the dog likes to avoid it. But there's almost never a scenario where if the dog is in full adrenaline prey drive, I've seen it very rarely, especially if the dog is not on a leash and they're running. Is the vibration able to break through that drive, break through that level of intensity? And so oftentimes I will use it as a corrective, as a minor corrective, but not as a general tool that I would use for like recall and pairing it as a negative reinforcer for obedience. And so the tone you can use as like a distant whistle, or you can pair it with anything. The sound can mean, you get your favorite treat if you come back. It can also mean that a punishment is about to arrive. And I will often use the tone for clients that are seniors, and like because it's just too hard for them to find the dog's level if I'm training the dog. And then the tone basically just means I need your attention, or come on back. Like I've got one guy right now, he's in November he'll be 92. And so and he's got a very high drive Jack Russell. I don't know that they make low drive Jack Russells, but this thing is like at the tippity top of high drive. He's got 400 acres of land and a big farm and whatnot. And there's other dogs, all working dogs. There's an Aussie and a border collie and all these dogs on the property. But this little, she's now 7 or 8 months old, Lucky. Uh, I'm training the dog. I'm training his son, who's in his 70s, which is old enough to kind of communicate a new piece of technology. But basically, the tone is just recall, so that way the dog can come back. I've paired it with a stim, so that way the dog learns to avoid the stim and just listen to the tone, because it could be 2 acres away, kind of thing, and a couple hundred yards away. And the dog knows that it means come back, and it's easy for him. He just has to find the T button, hit that T button, and the dog comes back. So there are certain situations that you can use it for, but ultimately, if you want to get away from the e-collar, I want my voice to be the tone. I want you to ultimately listen to me and avoid the e-collar. But it's a great assurance for anybody.
Yeah, and I don't really use the vibrate for the exact reason you said. Most dogs, it creates a startled response,
Yeah.
but I've started within the past year and a half or so really using the tone more.
Okay.
And what I like about the tone is that most people that I work with, in fact, everyone that I've worked with so far with the remote collar, they are very comfortable using the tone.
Yeah.
Whereas they're less comfortable even using low level stim. And just to clarify for someone who's listening that may not know the terminology of the four quadrants of opera conditioning, because negative reinforcement, as you know, is often confused by a lot of people. Easy way to remember is negative and positive is adding or taking away, and it happens after the behavior. So again, this is for the listeners. So negative reinforcement is encouraging the repeat of the behavior. Punishment is preventing the repeat of the behavior. So if I'm encouraging a dog to repeat a behavior and something is removed after the behavior is completed, that's negative reinforcement. So this would be like pressure-based training or anything that the dog turns off. So the human example we always use is the beeping in the car. You get in the car, it starts to beep, you buckle your seatbelt, the beeping stops. So when we're talking about negative reinforcement, we're talking about the dog doing something to turn off something that we have added into the equation. And so the way that I have people start with the tone, and something else I've learned over the years working with people, is it's much better for them and much better for the dog if we
Mm,
get them proficient at their timing on tools that don't create any sort of positive punishment. So getting them good at reward based training, and once they feel comfortable doing that, then we get them better at implementing negative reinforcement. When they get good at that, okay, now we can start implementing and adding positive punishment. Because
mm,
if someone's timing is off with positive reinforcement, okay, they might teach the dog the wrong behavior. They're trying to teach the dog to go on the climb bed, and they signal the dog to go on the bed. The dog goes on, turns, sits, and looks at them, and then they reward the dog. Okay, they're rewarding the dog for sitting and looking at them and not necessarily going on the bed, but that's not going to create any sort of harm.
yeah.
If they're correcting at the wrong time, of course, they can create confusion, which can come out as frustration and even aggression. And so, what I started to do with the tone, and what I really like about e-collar technology, is how they have the setting to where it can go from tone to correction. So, I first teach the dogs to recall on the tone, just like you were saying. And then I start using the tone to replace what I call teachable moments. So, teachable moments in my system is when a dog does something that's not dangerous or destructive, and it is through this learning process that they discover what they should do. And I use this for stays or violating boundaries. So I have a word that predicts negative reinforcement. If the dog breaks the stay, I'll use that word. Usually it's So I'll say, what do I want the dog to do? I want them to go back into the stay. Or if they violate a boundary, let's say the dog's not allowed on a certain piece of furniture, a sofa, dog jumps up, what do I want the dog to do? I want them to come off of the sofa. And I continue teachable moments until the dog responds to the marker for that specific situation. So the
Mm,
dog jumps up on the sofa. I say, dog jumps off. Then I say, okay, great. The next one, it's going to be a correction. Now we're going to start working towards actual reliability. And that would be using positive punishment when I say correction. So adding something unpleasant that the dog doesn't like to prevent the repeat of the behavior. So once I get the dog responding to the tone as a recall, then I start using it as a combination of what would be called avoidance or escape training. So they escape the tone and they avoid the correction, because after a second and a half of holding down the button, it transitions to the stim. So then I use the tone to start replacing my teachable moments. Dog breaks a stay, I could just hit the tone. Dog violates a boundary, I can hit the tone. Or even I like to take my dogs on nighttime walks. I'm nocturnal. I work better at night.
yeah.
And so at around usually somewhere between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., I
Yeah.
take them on a walk around the neighborhood. It's about a 30-minute walk. And I don't want to be yelling the dog's name. And what's cool is the vibrate. If the dog's running or they're really get into what they're doing, they may not, there's a good chance they won't feel the vibrate. Even
Yeah.
though we said it often creates that startle response, if the dog's running around and they have a lot going on, they may not feel it. I'm not sure. But the tone they'll hear
Yeah.
because it's right next to their ear. And I don't want to be yelling my dog's name out at midnight. So I could just reach down, press the tone, dog comes cruising over. And there's no stress because, of course, the dog knows how to turn off that tone by complying, and it pretty much never goes to the shock. But when I have clients using this, they're also more, I'm trying to think of the right word. They're less stressed by using a correction right away.
Yeah.
So when the dog knows that the tone will go to a correction if they don't comply, the owners feel more comfortable holding it down because they're saying, well, the dog's choosing at this point to take the correction.
Yeah.
So they feel more comfortable and confident implementing it. I don't know if you've used the tone in this way, but for me, it works really great. The only downside is you use the collar more, which
Yeah.
some people will brag about the fact that I got my dog trained on the collar. Now I never have to use it. I never press the button. Almost every time I take my dogs out, I am pressing the tone because I'm using it to communicate, no different than if I was using my voice.
Yeah.
What are
100%.
your thoughts on that?
But it reminds me of my relationship with my wife when we were dating, and I had a couple of dogs versus once I got them all e-collar trained. It was, I don't want to go for a walk with you and the dogs because you're hollering to the dogs the whole time, and we keep interrupting me, or you don't finish your sentences, and then you can't get back on
Yeah.
track, and you're constantly communicating with the dogs. Versus this is great because all I have to do if the dog goes too far is I hit a button, whether that's the
Hmm.
tone, the vibration, the stim, whatever it is. I can communicate to the dog completely non-verbally and still listen to my wife and communicate to the dog that I'm saying come, or get your, get out of the garbage, or heel beside me, or lay, stay in a down, or whatever. It's just a form of
Hmm.
communication that you can pair it with anything and everything. But that's what it reminds me of. And I think that with the other thing with like proud to get away from the e-collar versus just seeing it as a tool. Every single person, well, maybe not everyone, but 90% of people say, is this tool for life? Is this going to be for life? And I go, well, it doesn't have to be, potentially, based on your scenario. Some people, I'm like, you need this tool forever, no matter what. Don't leave your house without it, because this is your primary communicator, and this is a very serious dog that you are not putting the time in, or barely can contain, or whatever. It's a very important tool, like your seatbelt, right? And
Hmm.
so you might never need it, but when you do, you're glad that it's there. And then most people go from, I want to get away from this as soon as possible, before they use it. And then they go, oh, this is the best thing ever. I don't, I don't ever want to leave the house without it. And so
Right.
it's a great tool when used properly, but like anything great in your life, you made a financial investment and you made a time investment. And it's the
Hmm.
same thing with the e-collar. And it's not something that is super easy to figure out on your own. Some courses are very thorough. I made mine thorough and easy to understand. Other people's are thorough and kind of tricky to understand, and then some people just insist on going about it on their own, which is will often backfire. But it's a tool that, when used responsibly, you'll never go back. It's the best thing. It's like it's like having a smartphone versus a dumb phone. When used properly, it's the best tool ever. And that's the biggest takeaway.
And with any tool, an easy way to look at it is use it when you need it. And I agree with you with the remote collar. I mean, every time I take my dogs out, I put the remote collars on because it is the seatbelt, it's the safety
Yeah.
net. I don't want to have to use it, especially if I'm using it as positive punishment. But
Yep.
if I need to use it, I have it. And
Totally.
that's when we are trying to think more about the well-being of the dog, because if the dog I can't show the dog every single thing that exists in the world in a simulated environment.
Yeah.
There's going to be something that might come up that is unexpected for me and my dog, and it changes my dog's in a behavior I wasn't ready for.
Yep.
And if that behavior can cause serious harm or death to the dog, I have to be able to control the dog in that moment, such as running into the street or running after an animal that could potentially be a predator if you're in areas that have wildlife that could be dangerous to a dog. It also makes me think about food, because a
Mm.
common one that people ask, and I hate when people use the word bribe. I can't stand it when people say, "Oh, you just bribe your dog." That's another one of those things that people start throwing around because they've heard somebody else use it.
Yeah,
First of all,
sure.
you never bribe a dog based on the definition of the word bribe. Usually it's for something illegal. You're bribing the judge, you're
Right.
bribing police.
Right. Yeah.
If it's legal, then you're paying someone. And if
Right.
we're thinking about a
Yeah.
reinforcement schedule, now we know the basics is continuous reinforcement and then variable reinforcement, less likely for extinction. Well, what does extinction mean? Extinction means the behavior goes away. So if we want a dog to always perform for us with positive energy and attitude, and as Ivan Balabanov calls it, healthy motivation, then we have to have something valuable for the
Mm.
dog. So do I always need to treat my dog? If you want your dog, maybe not treats, but a reward. If you want your dog to do it with energy and motivation, and as if you and your dog are working together towards a team, then yes, you're going to continue to have to use some kind of reward, because even if you switch to a variable reinforcement schedule, my dog's great, I don't have to reward anymore. What you're going to find is you're going to end up having using pressure
Yeah.
and more corrections to get the reliability, and then it's not going to be fun anymore. So the point that I'm making is, with all the tools that we use them when we need them in order to make sure that the relationship we have with our dog is as good as possible. And talking about off leash makes me think about socialization, and socialization is part of your 7 elements. In your view, what's the key difference between socialization and desensitization? And how should owners prioritize them for puppies or perhaps fearful dogs?
You might have a different definition. I found it helpful to define desensitization versus socialization. So social is just think of like hanging out with friends, family, meeting people, right? And so for dogs, you want them to meet. Social would be like socializing, meeting, greeting other dogs, and meeting and greeting other living beings, so humans, but also like elderly people and kids and things like that. And then desensitization is showing them the world, whether that's loud noises, whether that's, crinkly paper, whether that's a construction zone. Just like the world isn't that scary of a place, and I'm going to systematically show you that, keeping in mind things like fear stages where naturally the dog just kind of wants to shut down and run and hide in a cave, keeping that in mind, that like training can slide backwards sometimes. But what's the second part of the question of what's the most important part for puppies, or how do I
Yeah,
teach it?
puppies and fearful dogs.
Okay.
So, um, it was what's the key difference between socialization and desensitization, which you've already been hitting on,
Yeah.
and how should owners prioritize them for puppies or fearful dogs?
I think for puppies, oftentimes we're overlooking the fact of genetics. So, for example, my black lab, she's now 13, but when she was a puppy, if I didn't introduce her to another human for the first year of her life, I'm fairly confident within 10 minutes, she would still, if not 10 seconds, she would be everyone's best friend. Genetically, she's a lab. She's easy. She's now I didn't try this. I didn't experiment and isolate her from people, but genetically, she comes from a long line of dogs that are really great with people and really great at bringing back ducks. And so I don't really have to teach her that much with that. If anything, I need to do the opposite and say, actually, I'm a little bit more or a lot more important than all those other people. I think so often people rush socialization with other people and other dogs, that socialization doesn't mean you jump up into the other person's arm and lick their face. Genetically, you will have dogs that want to do that, and people are going to struggle if you allow them to do that, because they're being reinforced with all of these love drugs and all of these positive feelings and drugs that the body creates, and they are going to see another person and want a hit of that of all those wonderful drugs. And so those people really need to almost do the opposite and focus more on desensitization of the world and focused back on you, the owner, the dog's person. And for other people, dogs that are a little bit less social, you need to do a lot more trust building socialization. So having people throwing the dog food is still socializing them. There is a component of they see the person, they hear the person, and something positive comes from it, but they weren't overwhelmed by the person where the person picked them up, or try to get down and get in their face, or go and grab them and pet them. That's too much for a lot of puppies. And yet I think TikTok and social media and things like that have done a terrible job, or what it's done is it's set this expectation of this is normal, and that every corgi has a cute little voice and does this thing and is, wants to go see everybody. They are cattle dogs. I don't know. There's just certain social media accounts that have ruined a lot of breeds. A number of people that are like, oh, I got a corgi, and I'm like, let me guess what, Hammy and Olivia, or whatever the two corgis are that are famous. They're like, yeah, how'd you know? And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Or French bulldog. Okay, are you sure you didn't want to get a Gucci bag? And they're like, oh, yeah, it was between a Gucci bag and a living being. And it's challenging when you get dogs that you don't factor in genetics. Of course, your Corso is, or your Boerboel or whatever, is going to be apprehensive of new people. It was designed to be a guard dog. It's not a Labrador. And so anybody that's thinking about getting a puppy that has zero experience, I think they should get a lab. I think they should start with a lab, as long as they, with every breed, you need to factor in the cost and the exercise amount. But like, it's hard to screw up a lab. Although people
Yeah,
do.
labs, golden retrievers, Newfoundlands. There's definitely certain breeds that are better for first-time dog owners. And it's
You would
important to look
recommend,
at
sorry, I can't continue until we discuss this. You would recommend a new for a first time dog owner?
if they can handle the size. I think Newfoundlands, for the most part, are pretty easy.
Yeah.
They usually, from my experience, you can take one out that has no training at all.
Yeah.
And you'll have people say left and right, your dog is so well trained.
Yeah.
And this is something that I'm pointing out that I picked up from, I was having a conversation with my friend Bethany Perdome because she breeds Malinois, working line Malinois for sport work and things like that,
Yeah.
primarily French ring. But she recently started breeding Newfoundlands because she wanted to offer a good family pet. And we were talking about the training process, and she says, yeah, I really don't have to train them. And that's when she pointed out, there is a big difference between a well-trained dog and a well-behaved dog. A well-behaved dog just doesn't have any inherent behavioral issues or behaviors that could be seen as a behavioral issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the drive to do those things. Oh, we're walking at a slower pace. Cool. I'm going to walk right next to you at the slower pace.
Yeah.
But a dog that's well trained may not be well behaved.
Right.
It wants to do certain things, even though it can listen to certain guidance. And then, of course, the ideal goal is to have well behaved and well trained. But the size could be an issue for some people.
100%.
But from my experience,
And
they've all
grooming.
been such a pleasure to work with. Like, I
Yeah.
love Newfoundlands.
What's funny is the most aggressive dog, not the most aggressive, probably top 10 most aggressive dogs I ever worked with was a Newf.
Really?
Intact male and just not very well bred. But again, it's genetics,
Yeah.
right? It comes down to breeding. It's the same things I see in Nova Scotia. A lot of very poorly bred golden retrievers that are like a diet Pepsi Malinois, like a really high over the top neurotic golden retriever. So I don't even say goldens anymore as an easy first time
Mhm.
dog. It's labs, but that's also
Yeah.
where I
Well,
live.
what's unfortunate is anytime this is specifically with Hollywood, anytime Hollywood highlights a breed, it
Yeah.
increases the popularity of that breed for up
Yeah.
to 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's what they call the 101 Dalmatian syndrome.
Yeah.
So once a breed becomes really popular from any sort of media, then you have people out there that just want to cash in and they start breeding the dogs, even though they have no, I don't want to say no right, but they shouldn't be breeding the dog. They don't have the
Non-ethical.
experience, the understanding. Yeah, exactly. That's why it really started to worry me the more I started to see Malinois popping up in movies. Why are you guys doing this? Why are you highlighting a breed that people are going to see and go, oh my gosh, the John Wick 3 dogs, those are awesome. I want one of those, without even realizing what goes into owning and raising a
Yeah.
Malinois, or even German Shepherds, Rin Tin Tin. You take any of the breeds that became really popular, and German Shepherds, why do they tend to be one of the dogs that have more cases of reactivity? Well, because they were bred to respond that way to things that are a perceived threat,
Yeah.
instead of the dog that's going to run up and say hi to everyone. So, point being, make sure you find a dog that's suitable to your lifestyle and you seek out a good breeder. But I really like the fact that you point out the difference between desensitization and socialization. Often, when I talk about socializing a dog, really I'm talking about both of those, but I just call it socializing.
Uh,
And to separate it into those two categories, I think will help people to understand what they're doing in what given moment. Because, of course, what is desensitizing a dog? It's exposing them to things at a threshold that they can handle, pairing it with something pleasant, which is also a form of confidence building. And then socialization, as you said, interacting or perhaps being in an environment. How do you have them strategically work socializing? So, for example, with me, is I have people interact with my dogs at the house. I have them interact with the dogs at the vet, or I have people interact with my dogs at the veterinarian office. So I might go there and have people pet the dog and leave. I won't even go there for an appointment. And then where I train martial arts, I'll usually like to take my dogs there and let people interact with them there. And it's controlled. I know the people there, I have a relationship with them, and I can tell them what to do, and they follow the guidance pretty well. But outside of that, I don't let people come up and touch my dogs and pet my dogs, and I don't let other dogs run up to them. It's always in a more controlled environment for that direct interaction. Do you do something similar to that?
Yeah, it's that's probably the most important point is that it's controlled, right? And so I go, when you're desensitizing your dog and you're out at Home Depot, you're going to need to be able to confidently ruin a lot of people's days. You need when they come and go, "Oh my god, puppy!" You need to put your hand up and go, "No." And that's it. It's a one-word sentence, and people are going to say some mean things to you, and because they believe that they have the right, the God-given right, it's their First Amendment to go up and pet your dog, and that's simply not the case. This is your property. You're responsible for taking care of this dog. And just like, I would never let a stranger come up and touch my human kid. I would
Hmm.
that would end very quickly and very violently, if people just came up and started touching my kids. And so it's the same thing with my dog. What I like to do, because I have a relationship with the staff at Home Depot, is then it's set up where it's like, okay, and you're going to do this and you're going to, do it in this way. And it's controlled, just like if I went to the boxing club or if I went to the hockey rink or whatever. It's, are we watching hockey, or is it, I know the coach and I know the players, and we're going to go up and we're going to create this situation where kids have helmets and these giant pads on, and we're going to do this. But it's not just randomly kids with hockey skates on stepping around my puppy. That's going to end poorly. And so control is the most important thing. I do think, and I've been contemplating, I don't even run it anymore, but for a long time I ran a puppy class, and I called it the WWF of puppy classes, where the humans weren't allowed to touch the puppies, and they were just have to walk around the hall, or the facility that we were in, while the puppies freely interacted. But I was the referee. So they would wrestle and they would play and they would hide and they would do all these behaviors, but I was the only one allowed to interact with those puppies. And sometimes I think, and part of that was a mistake, and part of it was the best thing that could ever happen for the puppies. But it was like they had to be in the right age category. Anything over really like 19, some dogs 20 weeks. Anything older than that was too old to hang out with younger puppies, and especially if they had come every week for 6 weeks. But letting puppies play rough with other puppies is, I think, is so fundamental. They were taken away from their litter. They're often in homes without other dogs, and they're not getting that nipping, mouthing, biting, and also defending themselves from that. And then if they don't get that interaction, I think you can develop some very overly reactive dogs because they don't know how to handle that social pressure. But I would also often have my black lab Vega, who had litters of puppies, and I intentionally bred her because I wanted her to be better with puppies and use her in my puppy class. So in some situations, I didn't think, like, there's the side of having other dogs run up to your dogs, but it's like they're not on a leash and they're doing things. So I ran that puppy social class that, I mean, I never saw any long-term side effects of it, but um, I think if people didn't keep coming back and it was just like, the dog didn't have a great first experience, they need, some dogs don't have that internal confidence that you can build through socializing and kind of toughing them up and shaping it by having a referee that knows what they're doing, that can break it up and redirect dogs and do stuff like that.
Right. And some of the bad experiences that a puppy could have socializing with an older dog becomes
Their norm.
it's not part of the equation with a group of puppies. Like
Yeah.
you're not going to have a puppy that's going to overcorrect or
Yeah.
possibly hurt
Yeah.
the puppy like an older dog might do.
Yep.
Are you still running these puppy sort of socializing play groups? And if not, or someone who's not local to you, how could they find a puppy play group to be able to do this sort of socializing with their puppy?
So I created a puppy socializing play group, which you can see a video of it in my puppy section in my 7 Elements course, um, of how I ran it. It's a full, hour-long video or 45-minute video, of, I'm playing James Brown and dancing around and all the people are walking. But then there is a social component where we're doing touch and feeds where people are taking other people's dogs and they're socializing. Sometimes you have to create it. If you don't have it in your community, sometimes you have to create it. And then there, before long you become the local dog trainer or the puppy trainer. I don't run mine anymore. Actually, a client who came to puppy class, she's now over the past couple of years has become a dog trainer, and I've mentored her. And she came to my wife and I do a business seminar for dog trainers. We're about to launch another virtual one here, but do other people can take these things on and kind of see how these go. And I think it was one of my most favorite things to do because it's puppies. They're all running around and they're
Yeah.
socializing, and a lot of people don't see that in puppy class. Most of it is like keep them on a leash, keep them 25 feet apart, and it builds so much frustration. In what I've
Hmm.
seen is just it's not natural for a dog to see another dog as a puppy and not go explore. And so you're kind of creating this like, you know, oppositional reflex where it's just I want it more and I can't have it. And then you get the vocalization, and then that, you get that at 12 weeks old. You're gonna have that at 6 months as well. It doesn't just disappear.
Right, that frustration leads into reactivity. And something that someone could probably do is perhaps make a post on something like Nextdoor or Facebook or Meetup if they want to start a puppy group of their own, if there wasn't something that was already local and available. It's kind of funny how a lot of people get into dog training because of their own dog and they want to get help with the dog or they want to train it the right way, and it leads into them being a professional, as you said. Can you share the story of Rush, the rescue dog that you adopted in 2011, and how did that experience launch you into dog training?
So in 2011, I was doing an exchange in Argentina, and I started university later in life. I had traveled for a couple of years, was doing exchange, and I was in a tricky situation with my then girlfriend, now wife, that I needed to come back to Canada and resolve and rescue that relationship. And so I came back, and it was during Christmas break for university. So I'm staying at her place, but she was working, and so I I've always loved dogs. My last name is Doggett. It's really my last name. Most people think I changed it. I didn't. I've always been obsessed with dogs. So I've got these full days of nothing to do while she's at work. And I said, I'm going to go to the SPCA and walk some dogs, and with no intention of getting a dog. And I walked into this giant shelter room, and all the dogs are losing their mind, as unfortunately they do in these situations. And I made eye contact with this brindle boxer pity mix, and I took him for a walk and absolutely fell in love. And the staff said, "So, would you like to sign the papers and take him home? It's only 200
Of
bucks."
course.
And and they're like, "Yeah, what a great fit." And I had actually not walked him as the first dog. I walked a bunch of other dogs that came from a hoarding situation. It was horrible trying to get these dogs were petrified, whatever. And I took Rush out. He was perfect. And three people gave me compliments as, "Oh, what a cool looking dog, man." And I was just, my ego was inflated walking this little brindle, handsome boy. And I took him home. I was late to pick her up in her car. And to this day, my wife is actually still scared of dogs. She has a healthy respect, a healthy fear of dogs. And so she opened the door, and this pit bull sticks his head out of the car door, and she goes, "You've got to be kidding me. Like, whose dog is this? Is this your friend Pierre's dog?" We're in Montreal, Quebec. And I'm like, "This is Meat Rush." And she's like, "Where are you going to keep him?" And I was like, "Well, I'm going to take him back to your house." She's like, "I'm allergic to dogs, and my sister who lives with me is allergic to dogs. What are you doing?" So this was the beginning of my responsibility of taking care of a dog. So think about it make a plan before you adopt a dog. But Rush became my world. I was still in university, went back to Nova Scotia and was in school. And so a rescue dog can be a full-time job. This dog had reactivity, he had containment phobia, he had separation anxiety, which are different things but present themselves similarly. Um, he was fantastic with dogs and people, but very reactive to all other wildlife. Um, he had a lot of issues. And so 2011, who was on TV but Cesar Millan? So I started watching everything, Caesar pirated every season of Cesar Millan and watched them all, and started trying to replicate what I saw on TV, and with horrible results, absolutely terrible. Pinning him, a lot of pinning him, a lot of like body pressure and poking and doing things like that that I would see on TV. And what's interesting about TV is it's, I don't know what they call it, the Hollywood effect, where it's like dog is doing terribly. 10 seconds later, dog is doing amazing. And so I'm like, what am
Hmm.
I doing wrong here? And so I was, at the same time, in my fourth year of university, I got so obsessed with dog training. By my fourth year, I was working at the local Doggie daycare. I started a dog walking business, and I was working at the groomers while going to university and having this dog. I went in the deep end very quickly. And so Cesar Millan put on was doing these in-person training seminars with Sherry Lucas and Brian Agnew. And I went out, and that resolved a lot of conflict in my mind of like, oh, there's actually a process behind things. It's not just the magic of Hollywood. And there are certain techniques that I just wouldn't recommend doing, that you see from a lot of trainers, but the whole pinning thing I ditched pretty quickly. And but I was affirmed of, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I had a very cool moment with Caesar where I asked him, probably one of the best pieces of advice anybody can get in life. We had this one-on-one moment because everybody was out walking the dogs doing a pack walk with Sherry and Brian, and I was walking dogs to pay to go to this thing. So I was like, I'm going to hang out and play fetch with my dog. And Caesar came down, walking down the road with 45 dogs, a parrot, and whatever. And so it's like, what are you up to? And I lived in Colombia before that, in Argentina, as I had mentioned. So I'm speaking to him in Spanish, having this moment. He goes and he's going to feed the llamas. So I go in and I said, teach me something if you're open to it. And he's like, well, what do you want to know? And I didn't have anything on prepared. I was just expecting him to be like, "Oh, and here's how you." I don't know what I was expecting him to do, and I said, "Okay,
Right.
tell me about a time in your life that the biggest mistake you've made in your life, in your personal life and your business life, so I don't have to make the same mistake." And he was just floored, obviously, because that's a pretty heavy question, double question to get out of nowhere. And that was just, I don't know, divine intervention or something for me to pull that out. And he was dealing with something with his son at the time, and I don't know if that impacted the answer. But the business side, I'll start with there, was always sign a contract. Always make sure that, don't ever take somebody for their word when it comes to business. Like, get a contract, sign it, make sure you're protected, because although the world knows him as the dog whisperer, he never made a penny off of all the franchising that happened around that, which is absolutely horrendous. With personal stuff, he kind of, it was a real Yoda moment. He drew in the sand, and he had a straight line. He said, "This is you," and he put a circle around it, and a bunch of little lines on one side of the big line, and another bunch of lines on the other side. And he said, "These are all the people in your life that say no, it's not going to work, stupid idea, don't go for it, don't do it, waste of time." And all these people, while they're not yes men and they're not yes women, that they say yes to everything, they encourage you and they believe in you and they think, yeah, why not, go for it, what's the worst that can happen? I believe in you. You're good at this. He said, my number one most important influential person in my life was always telling me that it wouldn't work. That was a silly idea. And it weighs you down, especially in dog training, where like, it's a very lonely career. You're by yourself, you're with clients, but you're mostly with dogs and working on your business and social media. And you've got the left side telling you to punish the dog, and you got the right side telling you to only give them treats. And it could be confusing and conflicting, but you want the people in your personal life to support you and believe in you and surround yourself with those people. So that was a very influential moment in my training career, and I've tried to live by that since then.
And Cesar Millan did pave the way for a lot of professional dog trainers and brought dog training to the forefront of the public. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think people used to think about it as much before Cesar Millan became as popular as he did become. And that's something else to point out when it comes to Hollywood. We have to understand that they're an entertainment business
Yeah.
and they get paid more based on how long people watch their content. So, how long are people going to continue to watch the show, or are they going to leave and not watch episode 2?
Yeah.
So, there has to be a lot of conflict, usually to keep that view retention. And it's interesting because when I was doing Rescue Dog to Super Dog back in 2017, when we started training and working with the dogs, after I worked with the fourth dog, I think, because I had 6 dogs and the other trainer had 6 dogs, doing the lessons with the owners, after the fourth one, the executive producer came up to me and she said, "You're doing the exact same thing with every dog. What is going on here?" And I said, "Yeah, this is dog training. You have to build the communication system, you have to build a relationship. A lot of the stuff in the very beginning is the same."
Yeah.
But of course, with something like that show, as you said, there's the extreme situation and then, oh, the sudden fix. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. But that's not always exactly what's happening. And you've had the advantage of having this accelerated career, being on this fast track. You've studied under many well known different dog trainers. Besides the one you just mentioned, is there another pivotal lesson that you learned from each mentor and how it's shaped your own methods?
I've learned I really emphasize how important education is. I think it's, people will often laugh and be like, "Oh, you went to university, what'd you take?" And it's the it's just the pursuit of knowledge. I did a bachelor of arts and did a major in Spanish, and I live in probably the least Spanish speaking place in the world outside of Iceland. They probably speak more Spanish in Iceland than they do here. But that's fine. It's the pursuit of knowledge, and I really appreciate learning. And I've really wanted to diversify my learning because it started off with way too much compulsion in the gun dog world, and I was like, there has to be another way. Like, I mean, old school gun dog training that like you'd be probably hard to find today. And it wasn't training. It was some of it was just animal abuse, and I left multi-million dollar opportunities on the table, of like owning a facility that someone was ready to retire, and just to hand it to me. And I was like, I can't be associated with this. And so for me, it's been about more than just a moment, but but I will mention one. It's going and learning from people that at the surface I might disagree with, as long as it's not like, abuse or something, but like going and learning from different people and being open to these ideas and really keeping that professional suggestionist mindset at the forefront of my brain of like, I might need to pull something that seems like a strange approach to something out. And the more diverse my tool belt is, the better I can help other people that might have a physical or mental impairment or emotional challenge through things. So I think my education I've been really working for the past over a decade on not only the dog training side of things, but the business and communicating, doing things like Toastmasters and improv classes to try to work on my communication skills so that I can be a better teacher. I actually just applied recently to be a substitute teacher in the school system because I'm like, I want to be a better teacher in general, and I'm going to learn from teaching kids how to communicate. If I can control a classroom of 30 kids, I can do better in seminars. I can do better in different things like that. So it should be interesting. We'll see. I might regret that very quickly, but that's okay. It's not a full-time gig. And so there was a moment with a trainer. I won't mention her name, but we were at this seminar and she has an extreme purely positive approach to training. And we're training and I'm learning some cool things and whatever. And she had this very high drive check. Yeah, probably check. I mean, it looked, excuse me, like a Czech German Shepherd, very high drive, very big, intact, probably 95-pound German Shepherd, male German Shepherd. And she was trying to do these techniques with the dog, and I could see the dog was getting frustrated. And then I watched it try to bite her in the face. And it's purely positive. There is no corrections. There's no whatever. There's no aversives. And to try to watch her struggle through working with that dog was A, scary, and B, just a very awakening moment for me of like, there is no one way. And there is no, um, that balance is important. And that level of balance will fluctuate throughout your relationship with the dog, and in developing the relationship with the dog, you might be on one side or the other of the coin a little bit more, a little bit less, in order to establish control and a clear communication and a relationship and understanding of the dog. But also, not everybody can have any kind of dog. I certainly can't. I would never own a Malinois. I've always wanted a Malinois up until a certain point in my life. But until I'm down to one dog and my kids aren't home, I don't have the mental bandwidth to handle a Malinois. And some people would say, oh, sure you can. But it's like, it's not only what I'm able to do, it's what I want to do. Like I surf, and I was in the ocean for many hours just the other day. And if I've got a young Malinois dog, I got to get out and I got to, do certain things that I don't, I'm at a different stage in my life. So that person was not at a stage or a place where an understanding maybe of dogs and behavior to have that kind of dog in her life at the time. So yeah, that was a big lesson.
Right, and you're thinking about the overall well-being of the dog. It's like, yeah, you know how to train and handle a Malinois, but can you provide it the life that it needs based on your current lifestyle? And I think that's really smart and good forward thinking. And one of the issues, since you started talking a little bit about pure positive, one of the issues I have with pure positive, and I know there's trainers out there that hate the different terminology. I was talking to Robert Cabral, and he says, I hate when people say, oh, you're a balance trainer, you're this. He says, I train dogs. That's what I do. I train dogs and I adjust according to the dog that I'm working with and the goals that we have and the owner of the dog. And so there's lots of little elements, but the main issue that I have with pure positive professional trainers that
Yep.
are not willing to use all four quadrants of opera conditioning is number one, we know the science there. And we know that behaviors are being driven internally or externally. That's what we call extrinsic versus intrinsic behaviors. And if somebody wants to use a tool, so there's someone out there and they want to use a prong collar, or they want to use a remote training collar,
Yep.
and then they try to hire a professional and that professional is not willing to teach them the tool, then they're going to go do it on their own anyways.
Sure.
It's not like just because they go to hire a trainer and the trainer says, you probably shouldn't do that. They're already invested, they're already interested in using it. And so you can give them your opinion on the tool. So, for example, I don't usually recommend choke chains. Can a choke chain be used effectively by a skilled trainer? Yes. But I think most inexperienced people are going to have it attached to the live ring. Their dog might be reactive and it's going to choke the dog and could potentially cause damage. Does it mean the tool's terrible? No, but it depends on the hands in which the tool is in. But again, if somebody wants to use these tools, we have to know how to use it so we can properly teach them on the correct way of using it. And if we say right from the start, oh, no, I don't use any of that, well, then you're kind of doing a disservice within the profession because we have to be educated on everything within dog training. And it's one of the things that I admire quite a bit about Ivan Balabanov. He has some very strong opinions about certain training and certain styles and certain techniques, but he studies all of them. He says, there's no way I'm not going to study and know it as much as humanly possible and then have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
I have to understand the tool that we're talking about, or I have to understand the technique that we're talking about. So let's go to the next question. I want to know what inspired you to start Doggett style dog training in 2020. And what were some of the biggest challenges you faced launching your own dog training business?
So I wanted to start doggy style dog training because I was in a franchise and I wasn't happy in that franchise because I didn't want the actions and opinions of other people to reflect myself. Right. And
Mm,
that was people were saying things and doing things that were like, that's fine. It's great to have your own opinions and whatnot. It's the same thing as being a trainer. You don't have to use all the tools. You don't have to do all the things, but I want to be represent my own thing. And my thing is trying to be fun and creative and enjoy life and teach something that I enjoy, which is dog training, in a way that attracts the people that want to not take it so seriously. It can be very serious, and it's hard to be so lighthearted about serious topics sometimes, and you can't, when you've got dogs that are killing each other inside the same home. It's you're not going to sing a song about it necessarily with the client, but online, I think, specifically making videos and things like that, I try to educate through humor as often as I can, without just being, a complete joke all the time, because I do have I do have the pedigree to back up, the information. But I think trying to make it as relatable as possible has been my thing. And also just yeah, getting out into the world on my own. The most challenging part was launching the online program, and really understanding all of that on my own was very challenging in an international uh world that we live in a global economy. It's trying to make something that's going to be right for everyone. That's why the 7 elements course, I think, is the best course for any dog owner or dog trainer to have initially, because it covers so much. But it was also very challenging to make, because I did there's almost 200 videos in the course. It's too much information for most people. It's not designed to like complete in one sitting, or even
Right.
in a month or 2 months. It's designed to be an encyclopedia of, if you're in the puppy life stage, go watch the puppy section and maybe the health section. And if you're in you've got a lot of unwanted behaviors in your dog, watch the intro and then go to the unwanted behaviors. If you feel like you don't know anything about dogs, go watch a section about you and being a dog trainer. So I've accumulated, because I've worked with such a variety of dog trainers, and been a professional groomer for multiple years, and run a doggy daycare, and done all of these things, that I wanted to share my take. Because again, it's not, you must do it this way. There is only one way of doing things. It's really trying to empower dog owners to become the dog trainer for their dog.
Yes, absolutely. And I have a follow-up question, but I do want to go back to something you were talking about earlier, learning how to teach.
Mm.
There's a very interesting book. I haven't finished reading it, but it's titled Surrounded by Idiots,
Oh,
and people fall into one of these different personality types, I guess you could say.
yeah.
And now, of course, you probably have certain characteristics from each, but you're going to be stronger in one. And it really just talks about how to communicate effectively with the different type of person that you're talking with. So adjusting your teaching style to who you have in front of you to get the information, and also adding comedy. I think that's great. I mean, I can memorize a 1 hour stand-up bit after watching it a couple times when it's really funny. So there's a lot of science in being able to retain something that's entertaining
Yeah.
and funny. And so the follow-up question I had about the business, which I think when we were talking a little bit earlier about having self-doubt, or the what do they call it when you don't really feel like you are the expert even though you are acting as the expert? What's
Im-
the term for that?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Thank you. A lot of trainers have imposter syndrome. A lot of trainers have self doubt. I know because I've had it on many occasions still. I often think it when I talk to some of these world champion, world class trainers. I think to myself, wow, I still have so much more
Yeah,
I need to learn. I
of
mean, I've
course.
barely scratched the surface. So, someone starting a new business, I think the biggest fear for most, I could be wrong, but it's getting their clients.
Hmm.
How do they get their clients? What did you do to start putting yourself as the professional and attracting those clients to your business?
I worked dogs. I talked to people. I went out and trained dogs in front of grocery stores. I went to all the vet clinics, told them who I was, did a free lunch and learn where I'd go in, bring them food, show them how I train dogs, show them my beliefs and the tools that I use. I'll never forget one clinic I called and I said, "Oh yeah, this is who I am and I would like to come in." And she said, "Oh yeah, there's a dog trainer down there that uses shock collars and we don't recommend him, but we would love to have you." Well, there was no other dog trainer in the area and it was me. And then I educated them on e-collars and they sent me a ton of business over the years. And it's to the point where I recently, because I'm doing more online, and I have a small window of opportunity. I like to give back in my community and help out, and so I went into the local SPCA, which is very like no tools, no punishment, and whatever. And I'm volunteering there to help train the dogs. Now I'm doing it their way. That's fine. I'm a great clicker trainer. I'm a really good clicker trainer, and marking and rewarding behaviors is one way to do things. Are we going to be able to get there faster, or there's certain things that we're probably just not going to cover, but in learning one side of the coin, you got to get creative, which is fun and a cool way of doing things.
Yeah, and with the clicker training, do you use that in your normal system? Maybe not with the clicker, but a
Yeah, just
verbal
not.
marker. Is
Yeah,
that incorporated to all your training as well?
for sure. I mean, you gotta you gotta mark behaviors. I think for dog trainers specifically, I think learning how to use a clicker and just shut up and just mark and reward is an amazing, like, free shaping with a clicker. If you become really good at that, you can pretty well do anything with a dog. It's going to take longer, but your sight of how you see the dog and when to reinforce and how the dog is picking up the information, that's honestly when I really figured out that MCT oil, giving dogs MCT oil, um, really helps cognitively, and lion's mane mushroom by doing free shaping. Like, my lab was just not getting things. And when I would put her on and take her off of MCT oil and lion's mane mushroom, especially as she gets older, what a noticeable difference in her ability to pause and think through what it is that I'm trying to communicate and what lesson I'm trying to teach. Because I'm not speaking, I'm not moving. And so, very cool little exercises to do.
That's a good way to enhance the trainer's skill as well. Something that
Yeah.
I learned from Robert Cabral, which he made very popular, was what he calls the binary dog, which is a basic yes no system.
Yeah.
And I started incorporating it with my clients. And I'm going to be starting back up stay and trains. I haven't done it for a while,
Yeah.
but I'm getting ready to start it back up. And what I'm going to now do with the first go home lesson
Yeah.
is going to be just having them focus on essentially a yes no system, but without the corrections in the beginning. So having them either use free shaping or capturing. So
Yeah.
just to define that really quickly for those that don't know, capturing is your dog's already doing the behavior. So your dog sits, your dog lays down, your dog goes to their bed, and you capture it by marking it and then giving your dog a reward so they connect that to being something good. And then free shaping is your dog is working towards a goal. So let's say getting a dog to press a button, the dog looks at the button, you mark and reward. The dog gets closer to the button, you mark and reward. The dog sniffs it, you mark and reward. Eventually they paw at it. So it's what they call successive approximation towards the final goal. And then when the dog does things that they don't want them to do, they just implement what we talked about earlier, what I like to call a teachable moment, where we're not punishing the dog, we're showing them the preferred behavior.
Mm.
And then you tell them, you say, this is all you have to focus on, rewarding behaviors that your dog is doing that you like and preventing them from practicing behaviors that you don't want.
Mm.
So by simplifying it, they can focus on those easy tasks. And then, of course, as they get better, then we can put more on their plate. And you're quoted as saying, us humans need the training too. What was an early insight you had about training owners that changed how you teach?
It was being in my facility with the whiteboard, their dog losing their mind for 45 minutes, and then me saying, "So, does that make sense?" And the person just being completely blank and going, "Yeah, yeah, makes sense." And I was like, "You didn't understand a darn
Right.
thing that I said." But so just falling into that trap of people learn in different ways. My wife will never watch a video. She will never see this. But if we printed the transcript, she would have it done in about 5 minutes. People
Mm.
learn in different ways, and that was a very interesting teachable moment. And that is a big part of why I wanted to create Doggett Style, as well as I knew that if I can get, for example, my 7 elements course before I start basic training with someone, or my e-collar course to them before I start e-collar training with them, that it's going to prepare them, that they're going to feel comfortable learning, sitting down, pulling out their phone and watching a video before before I'm ever with them in person. Or for my board and train programs, your stay and learn programs, I would give them, while their dog is with me, they have to watch, these 10 videos. And then, I'm giving them a take home video before they ever even arrive and going, this is what we're going to do when you arrive. And just, they got it. They just understood, and they knew what to do because they had seen it. They had experienced it when they were ready to learn. They were sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. They were, not distracted by their own dog barking, and they could do it in a time where they didn't have something else on their mind, or they could come back to it. And so that's been a huge, huge takeaway.
And it removes the pressure, I would imagine, for them for trying to learn and retain everything in the exact moment when you're first teaching it to them. So having the information prior, and then also probably being able to, in a sense, as you said, digest it at the speed that works best for them. I
Yeah.
mean, we're very passionate about dog training. And every time I do these, I always say in the very beginning, we're going to shoot for an hour. But then it always ends up going over because we're so into this. This is a
Yeah.
subject that we're very passionate about. And that's been one of the struggles that I had early on, which I still have the issue. I try to combat it by having a stop time with lessons
Mm,
because I'll just keep going. Oh, you want to
yeah.
keep talking about dog training? I'll keep feeding you as much information as you want.
Yeah.
But being able to give it to them in that sort of bite size way or manner before the actual lesson, I think that's really smart. I do want to talk a little bit about dominance and pack theory since
Okay.
Caesar Milan came up earlier, and there's a lot of debate over dominance and pack theory.
Yeah.
How do you address that concept of dominance in your training, and what misconceptions do people still have?
I don't think that word comes up too often in my day-to-day world. I don't think a lot of people, they're not saying it to me anyway. It might come up in my comment section when I make videos, but um instead of dominance, it's more the word of respect. My dad was a cop, and he was a Mountie in RCMP. He would probably not like me saying cop. He was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, and his number one word was always respect. And I think that's often what's missing. And so people think dominance is like, because I said so. And sometimes there's a component of that, but anyone raised by a boomer has heard that sentence. And as we were talking previously about getting paid, of course you want to get paid. Who doesn't want to get paid? And it's much more enjoyable. But ultimately, my dogs, especially with a pack of dogs, I have 4 dogs right now. I've owned 9 at one time. And that's when I had, 53 acres and a big facility and ponds, and we'd go four-wheeling all the time. I had the space, I had everything able to manage those dogs, but it was still management in a way. But they all knew that I was in control. So if 2 of them started to fight and I hollered or I got involved in the fight, they knew that I was the one ending the fight. And I think maybe that would be the most dominant thing and dominant situation where I go like, I am going to finish whatever you guys start. So don't bother. Look to me first, you know? And so I hope that answers your question. With the pack things, they are pack animals, and so they want to be. When I think of pack theory, and the thing that comes up the most for me is being understanding of the dog. Of course they want to be with you. Of course they have separation anxiety. Of course they want to go over and see the other dog. You aren't a dog. You don't speak dog. You will never speak dog as well as a dog speaks dog. I hope your dog's not sniffing your butt as much as they want to sniff another dog's butt. It's there's components of this where there needs to be more understanding. Of course, the German Shepherd is going to lose its mind when somebody comes to the door. And so if we try to dominate every situation and suppress every situation, it's going to create more frustration for you and the dog. I think there needs to be more understanding, but we need to fundamentally respect the fact that they are a different species and they communicate differently. But ultimately, you are responsible for this dog or these dogs, and they need to know that you are in charge.
And when you say respect, it sounds like it's a two-way street. You want the dogs to respect you, but you also respect the dogs and
Yeah.
who they are and what they're capable of. How do we get a dog to respect us? Is that through consistency and rules and expectations and follow through, which makes me think about boundaries. Often we put boundaries on our dogs. And what I tell my clients and my students, I say, don't think about it as boundaries that you're placing on your dog. Think of it as boundaries that you're placing on yourself. You are telling
Mm,
yourself, this is a boundary. And so if the dog, let's say, jumps up on the sofa, I have to get up and enforce the rules.
mm,
I can't in this moment decide I'm going to be lazy and not do it, because then we're talking about inconsistencies, which of course can create confusion and conflict within the relationship. So, are there certain strategies that you have your new clients, or maybe a mindset that you give your new clients when working with their dogs to develop this two-way street of respect?
At first, it starts with a conversation because they say, ultimately, I'm not moving in. I'm happily married. You're going to do whatever you want to do with the dog. And so let's have an open discussion about it, because some people will say, like, how many people say, like, oh, my dog sleeps in bed with me. Oh, I know, but I know. Yeah, I know I shouldn't be. And I go, well, let's talk about it.
Why?
Is it a problem? Right? Because for some people, it's genuinely not a problem. I would never want the
Hmm.
dog to sleep in bed with me because A, dogs are disgusting. They're they're finding all the dead seagulls to roll in. That, like, they're,
Right.
they're walking anyway. Dogs are gross. I don't want them in bed with me unless I'm sick. Unless I have a man cold, then all the dogs need to get in bed because my wife will not snuggle me and console me the way my dogs will. So they all come in bed with me in that time, and she has to sleep on the couch. And so, with respect, it really comes down to, what are we? Is there a respect issue, and are these little things actually impacting the end result? Because if you take, as a professional, I've noticed that if you take too much away from people, you add too many rules all at once, they won't do it. There will be a
Hmm.
resistance. They will fight you. They won't want to do it. You took too much away too soon. With some people, you just need to have the conversation, or I've had the conversation where I go, here's how I see it. And I've been doing this a long time. So you can either trust me, but you don't have to. These are just suggestions. And so I've noticed, in doing this for well over a decade, that if you let your dog on the furniture in bed with you, and your husband can't come into the room without the dog baring its teeth at you, that's a conflict. So, but
Hmm.
you could also just get divorced, right? You could do that too. Like, there are ways around all of these problems. So what do you want to do? Do you want to get a divorce, or do you want to learn how to get the dog off the bed without conflict? And because again, I it's not that I don't care. That's not the right way of saying it, but it's, I'm gonna leave. Like, this isn't my dog. This isn't my relationship. I would like to help you, but you need to be prepared to help yourself. So if you saying no to the dog in them getting off the furniture is not an option, we need to talk about some other things. Like, we need to create some strategies around creating a more harmonious household. However, at the end of the day, I'm going to run out of suggestions potentially, right? And so
Hmm.
some people are just not able. I was speaking to a young dog trainer just last night, and I was like, it sounds like he was taking it as, I'm not a good enough dog trainer. I'm not helping these people. And those dog trainers then always go to free. Okay, I'll take the dog, and I'll keep him at my facility, and I'll do it for free. And I'll come and I'll add 6 more lessons for free. And what they're missing is, no, no, the either your system is not right for the people, or no system is right for the people because they're just not prepared to do the work. And so, and oftentimes those are people that unintentionally raise aggressive dogs. And it's very interesting when you have a consultation with people that are dealing with aggression. If you ask them, one of the questions in my consult is this your first dog? And if it's no, and it's aggression, I'll ask them, tell me about your last dog. And was there any aggression there? Because some people have a history of raising aggressive dogs because they're just no rules, they're reinforcing behaviors that is subsequently creating aggressive dogs. I'll never forget one of my mentors and I were out west in Canada, uh, helping train the head trainers of the RCMP canine unit on how to use e-collars properly. And so I really emphasize that word. And so I'll never forget, we're in a hockey rink, of course, because it's Canada, and we've got a bunch of German Shepherds. And this hockey team, this junior A team, walks through, and one of the Mounties bends over his German Shepherd as it starts to let out a low grumble, just and he bends over and he goes, "Yeah, good boy. What a good, oh yeah, get him. That's right." And so he's ramping up the dog because everyone's a suspect. They want their dogs to be aggressive with whether you're wearing hockey gear or not. And how many people, it just clicked for me, how many people bend over the dog and go, "That's okay. That's just our friend Tom. That's okay. That's just our friend Tom." So some people, they're trying to reassure the dog, but they're ramping the dog up to go and to bite Tom in the ass. And so there's a history of aggression there, with the people. So lots of lessons over the years.
Yeah, and it makes me think about something that I'm pretty big on when I am teaching a group or perhaps doing a seminar, even if I'm doing a lesson, is defining what we're talking about. A lot of times we use words and one person has a definition for it and somebody else has a completely different definition. So, like, aversive, for example, people say aversive quite a bit. And a lot of times they might be thinking that it has to be punishment, but by definition, it's just a great dislike.
Yeah.
So if the dog has a great dislike to it, okay, that's aversive. Or dominance, how that started this whole part of the conversation. A lot of people hear dominance and they think, I
Hold
need to
them to the
be
ground.
aggressive towards my dog. Or they watch things on TV that are meant to be entertaining, not necessarily meant to be an instructional or educational, and they implement things improperly simply by not having the proper guidance or direction. And that can create issues with aggression. I mean, it's a common one that I've seen where they use techniques the wrong way. And as a side effect, because the timing's off or whatever it is, they create these issues, which makes me think with your online courses, that's something that we have to do as trainers that present to an online worldwide audience
Yep.
in a very, very black and white way. But dog training's not always black and white.
Yeah.
How do you combat that when there's so many gray areas within dog training, but often in the beginning, we do have to be very black and white?
Yeah. So it's really difficult. I think I love that you said it's important to define your terms. I hated to define my terms until when I was dating my girlfriend, now wife. Her training is, she's got a doctorate in law. So I would say something and she would say, "Can you define that for me?" And I hated it because I was like, "I don't even know what I'm saying right now." But she's like, "No, you have
Mhm.
to actually think about what you're saying, Evan, and explain it to me." Also, she's also French Canadian, so there's that component. But she's like, "No, I want to make sure that we're on the same page," which is why I get a kick out of when dog trainers like Robert says, "I don't like to define myself as a balanced trainer. I just train dogs." Yeah, but that's not necessarily helpful for somebody who's coming to you and you're like, "I think we should use a prong collar." If they're like, "Whoa, absolutely not." Or you're a client looking for a dog trainer, and oftentimes the purely positive school will make you feel very bad if you bring up that you've ever tried to correct your dog or used a prong collar or used anything but a harness and treats. And so I think it's important to define our terms and then ultimately ask the clients to a degree what it is that they're okay with and what they're open to. So often people they just don't know. Like I've
Mhm.
spoken to a lot of people about e-collars, and I do e-collar training with almost every dog because of not because we need an e-collar to solve every problem. It's the freedom that it allows, and it's the diversity and just the ease of communication that it allows. Can you train every dog without an e-collar? Absolutely. Does it make things easier? Sure. So it's having that conversation and making sure that you're on the same page with people. So in order to create content online, to make it black or white, there are certain things. I don't know that I do make it black and white. I give everybody the option. So for example, and maybe this is a bad example, and please uh help me through this if this isn't what you mean, but like in my 7 elements course, for example, there's how to walk your dog with a slip lead, a halty, which is also a gentle leader, so they're both kind of in the same video, a prong collar, a star mark collar, all these different tools, because ultimately you need to pick the tool that works for you. It actually also works for your dog, because a lot of people will be like, a harness works for me, but it doesn't work for you and your dog, right? Because you can't hold your 200-pound noof back while it's trying to go say hi to the kids at the playground. Yeah, unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then if you're Arnold, yeah, okay, you can hold the dog back and there's no pressure on their neck and it's all hunky dory. But otherwise, it's not working for both.
Yes, and a good way to look at it is I like how Michael Ellis says that he says we need to think of dog training as guidelines and not rules.
Mm,
A lot of times in the beginning, I teach more as these are rules that you need to follow,
yeah,
and then look at it as guidelines as you start to understand how the system works. When you
right.
start to get to that aha moment, you go, oh, this all makes sense. I see how this is all connected.
Yeah,
A good example could be when I'm doing those, what I call teachable moments. I always tell people do not reward a dog with an actual physical reward. You could tell them good dog, but you don't want to give them a treat because this creates, as you know, a reinforcement loop. Oh, jump up on the sofa, get off the sofa, get a treat. Great. I'm going to keep doing it.
yeah,
Now, you could teach a dog that jumping on the sofa and getting off the sofa. Maybe that's not a good example. Let's say a stay. The dog breaks a stay, they go back to the stay, you give them a treat. You can do that, and that will teach the dog to respond to the marker that predicts negative reinforcement rather quickly. Dog gets off, they go back, I give them a treat, dog goes great. I'm using that reinforcement loop. Before you know it, the dog's responding to quite rapidly. Now we remove the treat and we just enforce with the so we teach the word faster. But
mhm,
if I teach that right away to somebody, they're more likely going to make mistakes by creating
yeah,
the reinforcement loop and not knowing how to stop it. So okay, black and white, just don't give the dog the treat. Are there other
yeah,
ways? Yes. And you can explore as you get better and as you start to understand how the science of dog training works. And what we talked about before we started, how I'm really big on trying to teach people learning theory.
mhm,
Because learning theory, as it relates to dog, most of it's been documented. Why a dog responds here, why a dog becomes desensitized while another dog becomes more sensitive,
mm,
and understanding that science and being able to plug it in. But the whole point of what I was saying is black and white, do this, and hopefully you should get these results as you understand it better. Then you
yeah,
can adjust according to what works best for you.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it can't all just be a suggestion. You do need to give people a roadmap of like, and let's start with this. And that was the challenge of creating the online program. But that's why it starts with, we're going to get your dog to work for as close to 100% of their food as possible. And here's your reinforcement schedule, and how, when and how you're going to do that. And let's go. Pick an
Yeah.
obedience, and let's do it. And then you can switch things up and change things up as you want. But yeah, you got to give people a guideline.
And I think a lot of people just want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Just tell me exactly what to do
Yeah.
and I'll do it. And it made me think while you're talking, for me, when it comes to training and working with my own dogs, I give myself two main goals. The first goal, so if we're talking big picture, number one goal is how can I give my dog the absolute best quality of life based on what I can provide?
Mm,
And so if that means in order to give my dog off leash freedom in a safe way, I have to use an e-collar to do that.
yep.
If that means I have to correct my dog from doing one behavior to prevent them from doing something that could be dangerous or destructive, then I'm going to do that right away because I'm looking at the dog's overall quality of their life. How can I maximize the quality of their life? And then the next thing is I want my training to be an insurance policy on my dogs.
Mm,
Meaning, if something happens to me, people are going to be way more likely to take a very well trained dog than a dog that has a bunch of behavioral issues and won't listen to a single command. You may love the dog because you had it as a puppy,
yeah.
but does the dog have a good insurance policy? The type of dog that, again, if unfortunately something were to happen to the owner, that's going to be the type of dog that everybody wants to adopt and give it a new home. And speaking of online, you've discussed the impact of social media and TikTok on dog training expectations. What do you wish a new dog owners or what do you wish new owners understood about viral training videos and their dog's reality?
That dog training doesn't happen in 30-second increments. Um, it does in the sense that oftentimes people will train their dogs for far too long a period of time, but that sensational side of things can often create more conflict if you don't know what you're doing. And so a dog trainer pointed out recently that a lot of dog trainers are really like, let's normalize punishment. And I've got tons of I've got terabytes of videos that I intend to post, and also stuff that I can't post on social media because all you're seeing is the correction and you're not seeing all the work that comes before it or after it. And so people go, okay, well, I'll just slap a prong collar on the dog, and they, they buy a prong collar that's 4 times too big, slide it over the dog's head. It's dangling around their neck. And then they're just yanking on the thing going, this doesn't work. Or the dog completely shuts down and there's no context to it. And I think that's why ultimately I'm excited about creating more YouTube content. I've got these online courses, but I also want to help people for free. And so in the past year, I've started creating more YouTube content and just showing that long form side of things. And same thing with the e-collar stuff of like me helping clients work through problems with the e-collar. But social media is amazing and it's great, and it gives people the opportunity to meet new dog trainers and see that it doesn't need to be all that serious. But you also, I think it's very important to put out your authentic personality as a dog trainer on social media. I can't get over how toxic some dog trainers are, and I just am really curious as to what their clientele is like. Just
Mm.
just being so rude and ruthless. And my least favorite sentence that I've ever heard dog trainers say is, if you blank, you don't deserve to have a dog. And it's something like, if you don't walk your dog, it could be like, if you don't walk your dog 3 times a day, you don't deserve to have a dog. And it's like, well, there are situations, 22-year-old white male, that you know maybe you can't relate to, that person can't walk their dog 3 times a day. Why not give an example, a positive example of something that person who can't walk their dog 3 times a day could do in order to burn off some energy? And so, like anything, like any career or profession or point of interest, social media can be toxic or absolutely the most fun, positive community environment ever. And I think it's important as dog trainers, as pet parents, to unfollow the ones that get your blood boiling, that when you're done watching the clip, you're like, you're feeling very big feelings. I think there's a better way to learn.
Right. You bring up some good points. One, we don't want to shame people. That's not very helpful. And a big one with the shorts and specifically, TikTok, although I think TikTok has longer
Yeah.
videos now. I'm
It's
not
just
quite
easy
sure.
to
I
throw
post
out the
on
word
TikTok, but
TikTok if you want to say something negative,
right.
even though
or
it's
or
great.
just short videos in general
Yeah.
could bring up unrealistic expectations. And that's something that we all struggled with in dog training. You have a certain expectation, you start working with your dog's not getting it. Maybe lack of communication, maybe not enough steps done prior to whatever it is that you're trying to teach. But the fact is, the dog's not getting it.
Yeah.
And then we get frustrated, and that frustration leaks over to the dog. And now we're not moving the needle at all. And then talking about different trainers to follow, there's so many different dog trainers out there, and I am not the type of person to get on and bash dog trainers. I like to believe that everybody that is producing content, that I would hope that their overall goal is for the well-being of dogs out there. I mean, my mission when I started making video content was to improve the quality of life for all dogs by educating those that care for them. And often people will ask me, "Oh, have you studied this guy? Have you studied this guy? Have you studied this guy?" And a lot of times I may be aware of them, but I haven't studied them, mostly because my number one all-time favorite dog trainer is Michael Ellis, and I haven't even completely gone through and memorized all his stuff. And if I'm going to study someone, I want to study one of the greats.
Yeah.
I would study more of Ivan Balabanov's if he had more free stuff, but most of his stuff is behind a paid wall, which I do plan on getting his courses as well in the future. And then I'm also studying Nino, who I think is one of the best technical with his movements. Like, his execution is
Yeah.
so incredibly good. I haven't even mastered the full system that each of these guys present to the students. So I don't have time to go looking at what other people are teaching. I want to learn from the greats. And, maybe you're still seeking out and looking for whoever that person is. If you're listening to this, you have to find one that I think that you're going to be comfortable with, you agree with, but then also checking out other people as well to make sure you are learning from one of the best.
Yeah, and
Um,
anybody that it was a real turnoff. I had a mentor once that was like, "You don't need to go anywhere else and learn from anyone else. I have everything you ever need to know." I was like, "All right, time to leave."
right, right.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes that could be okay in the beginning just so
sure,
you don't get distracted
of
from the
course.
system. I think that would be something that would connect more towards a school or in person. So, I mean, when I was going through the Tom Rose School back as a student, they said, just focus on what we're teaching. And then once you graduate, then go out and go to seminars and do other courses and continue to learn. But don't confuse yourself right now by trying to learn 10 different strategies when you haven't even figured out a single one yet. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, and I tell that to clients too, because I'm like, you're a millennial or you're whatever, you're a certain age where like you're probably on Instagram and Facebook and whatever. I'm like, please just, I'm not saying that the other dog trainers are wrong, but I don't want us to spend the first 20 minutes of our conversation with, well, this other trainer said this. I'm like, if you can,
Right.
if you want to work with me, please trust me. And I don't take that lightly that you're trusting me, one voice at a time. And so let's just pause your subscription on the other people for a little bit. And if you see something comes up, save it for later. But for now, let's just do it this way. And it's always been my Malinois clients that are like, but this
Right.
person said this. And I'm like, okay, you've tried it, right? Did it work? No. Okay, let's move on. Let's try this thing.
And sometimes a technique may not be working, not because it's a bad technique, but it could be the application of the
Yeah.
person trying to utilize the technique. And speaking of online videos, in one of your episodes, you mentioned desexing versus behavior. What's your position on spay neuter relating to behavioral problems? And is there an ideal timing or any advice you give pet parents?
It's very tricky because you need to know who it is that you're speaking to about desexing, because some people are accidents happen, right? And we certainly don't need more unwanted puppies or bad genetics
Mhm.
out there in the world. But personally, I will never desex another dog that I get ever. And this is hard to say because there's a lot of great dogs that need homes, but personally, I will never adopt another puppy that has been desexed at puppyhood. Like, if they've been desexed before 6 months, which I would never, I would always wait anyway. But like, Some puppies are desexed at like 6 to 10 weeks old.
Mhm.
And those dogs, for any dog trainers listening out there that can't figure out how to quote unquote fix a problem with a dog, ask if they were desexed at an extremely young age. Those dogs will never be right. They can't function properly because their body has been drastically altered at at infancy, really. And so your body is, they're mammals. The testes are creating testosterone, the ovaries are creating estrogen, and the body is using that. The whole endocrine system, the whole nervous system, everything, the cardiovascular system, the muscular system, it's all working together. Can you tell I'm teaching my kids anatomy right now, so I know all the systems. But the immune system, all of it, it's all working together. There's all these different systems in our bodies and in their bodies. And I think this is very relatable. I mean, most of my clients are women, as I'm sure they are yours as well. The vast majority of my clients, the ones that call and pay and do all the work with the dog, are the women. And so it's a relatable topic to say, if you or you know anybody who's had a hysterectomy, a full hysterectomy, and they almost immediately go on estrogen supplements because their body still needs estrogen. And now
Mhm.
women are learning about estrogen therapy during premenopause and perimenopause and full menopause, that it can be very helpful for them and their bodies. But medicine has traditionally been studied by men who didn't give it about women's bodies and how they worked. And now we're learning all these other things. I only know this stuff because I'm married. And so and so my wife has educated me on all this stuff that, like, most of it, it's like autism in women. Most of it wasn't studied because it was all men studying men and boys, and women present very differently in the autism spectrum. And so learning all of these things with desexing, what happens is the body is still pulling for estrogen and testosterone. I mean, how many lanky dogs, if you see a super lanky dog, ask, that's not supposed to be lanky, ask when they were neutered. And it's almost always 6 to 8 months. Well, they never hit puberty, or they were just about to
Mhm.
hit puberty, and then they never got to fill out. But that also plays a mental state. So if you see this gangly, super goofy dog that seems to always be in this puppy state, they never hit adulthood because there wasn't testosterone, the estrogen in the system to calm the body down as it was growing. Also, huge correlation between increase in cancer and also cruciate tears. They did it on labs and golden retrievers that were neutered before 6 months of age and a year old. And the increase and then they recently did one with Rottweilers in Germany. I believe it was in Germany. Anyway, they did it with Rottweilers, of this correlation between cruciate tears and early spay neuter. And early means your dog isn't fully done growing. Most people look at their dog at 8 months and they go, well, he's done growing. And maybe at 8 months to a year, they're not getting any taller, but and maybe they're not even getting much wider, but all the ligaments and tendons and all this, they're still
Mhm.
forming, they're still growing, they're still attaching. And we snip our dogs and the growth hormones are gone, and then the body's pulling forward, the brain's pulling forward, everything's looking for it, and they become reactive, they become neurotic, they won't go in the elevator anymore, they won't go down the stairs anymore, they're scared of whatever. Well, their whole body is out of whack. So it's important to keep the pet population safe and under control, and we don't need unwanted behavior. Puppies, you also can't do things like I can't take my, not that I ever would want to, but my German Shepherd who's intact, or my female lab who's intact, and she's in heat right now, and he's a young horny male, and it's a nightmare. It's horrible, but I can manage it because I've got a big enough house that he can be over there, and I just rotate, and it's not that it's a nightmare, but it's not that big of a nightmare. He's howling and won't eat, and she's spotting a little bit, and it's not that big a deal. It's something that I'm prepared to live with, and
Right. And do you think this is one of those things that started years ago where they started
absolutely.
spaying and neutering dogs and then they just kept doing it without looking at the big consequences? Or is it a balance between the pros and the cons? What are the pros of doing it? Why do so many
I have a theory.
veterinarians and go ahead.
I have a theory. So I think one, most of them say at what age? 6 months. It's changing a lot now because there's so much talk and so much new resources and research and studies being done. And for anybody that doesn't believe this or whatever, you can go to, it's called Planet Paws on Facebook. Rodney Habib owns the page, and Dr. Karen Becker is a co-star on this Facebook page. Millions of
They're
followers.
also the authors of the Forever Dog.
Yep, and the Forever Dog Life. So you can get those books and learn about it there, or you can go on their free Facebook page. And the correlation, and then they have a paid group called the Inside Scoop. If you pay the $9-10 a month, you get to join the live calls, and they have an entire amazing encyclopedia. You can just go into the search bar and type in desexing, or you could type in flea and tick, or you could type in cancer, or you could type in food, or you could type in raw feeding, you could type in broccoli sprouts, and there's going to be a PDF on these things. Fearful dogs, almost everything health related, and you can get it. So Rodney says, pay the $10, go in there, download all the files, and leave. If it like money's an issue for you, go in there, but not everything can be free. And so all the information is there for like desexing specifically. There's like a 5-page document with links to all of these debunking things about like mammary gland cancer, and a lot of the things have been debunked. My theory is that you get your vaccines when the dog is like 10 weeks old, and then whatever the next one is, and then what's the next scheduled event. So we got you booked in 6 months old for neutering, versus if we say wait 2.5 years, may never see you again, right? And so I think it
Mhm.
started there. I think there was no follow-up studies on these things, and then once there were, most of the vets that have been recommending it, they're tired, they're overworked, they're some of the most overworked, underpaid, um sad people. They got into the job for saving animals, and they end up euthanizing a bunch, and it's a very, very difficult, challenging job. And God love our vets that do it, but it's very difficult, it's very expensive, and they're up against a lot, and so they're not going home and reading new studies. you know and so there
Mhm.
are a lot of, I've seen and I've read about a lot, and I've experienced a ton. Now what people can do, because I always tell people, okay, you did it, you can't sew them back on. You'll know for the next one, but yeah, they're gone. What can we do instead? There's a product called Glandular Support by Bark and Whiskers, and I'm telling you, Nate, if you have if you're dealing with reactivity, and you say, start giving this, slowly increase to a full dose over about a week. Because some dogs, it's typically just little dogs people give too much to, and then they'll vomit. It's just too much, but it's glandular support. So it's glands, and it's for the boys. It's just powder, but there's ground up testes in it, and so it puts testosterone back into their system. For the girls, there's ovaries in it, so it puts estrogen back into their system. And I'm telling you, that oil and a bit of green vegetables, and you're getting. But even if you just did the glandular support, and I'm not getting paid to say this, uh, it will just chill out the dogs because their body feels so whole. But it also has like kidney and spleen and brain and eyeball
Mm.
and all this stuff that a dog would eat. They would leave half the carcass of meat, and they would just eat the organs and the gonads and all these different things that we're like, ah, that's disgusting. Yeah, well, it's a dog. Dogs are gross, and that's what they love. And by adding this powder to their food, it's unbelievable how calm they are.
I could see it making a big difference. I mean, it's one of the reasons why older men, I mean, some of my friends are starting to get TRT. I mean, I haven't started taking any TRT, but my friends who are taking it, they had low testosterone and they are seeing huge changes in the way they feel, the amount of energy that they have. It just translates into everything. And this is where we start talking about conflicting information for a lot of people. They go to their veterinarian says you should probably spay your dog or neuter your dog between this time frame, and then they come to us and ask us what we're doing with our own dog.
Yeah.
Same thing with socializing at an early age. Oh, don't let your dog out until they've had all their vaccines, which I understand why they do that because that's their policy or that's what they believe is going to be best for the dog to keep the dog safe and healthy.
Yep.
But I just tell people what I do with my own dogs. For me, if we're looking at the pros and cons of, let's say, early socializing or socialization, to me, it's worth the risk, but I do it in a way that's smart and strategic. I'm not taking the dog to locations that are going to have a very high chance of the dog picking up parvo.
Yeah,
I'm going to take the dog to places where there's not a lot of dog traffic, but at least I can start getting the dog out in the world and seeing new things with the least amount of risk possible. And with my own dogs, I always tell people I don't get my dogs spay or neutered unless there is a medical need for them to get spay or neutered. If
yeah,
they have to, if the dog has, I don't know how common this is, but testicular cancer and removing it is the only option. Okay, then that's what we're going to do. But for my own dogs, I've always kept them intact.
yeah,
And that's the best advice that I can give to people from me not being an expert on the veterinarian side,
sure.
just what I do as a dog trainer for my own dogs.
And then you have to ask the well, you have to ask the people how what lifestyle they want to live, because some people are hellbent. I don't know that I finished the thought of,
Mm,
I don't wanna take my intact German Shepherd to a dog park ever, whether he's intact or not. I don't ever wanna
right.
take him to doggy daycare, whether he's intact or not, but you can't I would never take a dog, an intact male, shepherd to an off leash area, because a lot of dogs don't like that. And you got to know your dog, whether they're dominant or not. My shepherd is very playful, but he's also dominant. And so he doesn't want to fight, but he'll throw down if he needs to. I don't like being in those
Right.
environments, so I don't go there. My lab that's intact, she's a female. She's not. I know when she's in heat. I know when she's not in heat, and I would never take her there when she's in heat, obviously. But I can take her there the rest of the time if I wanted to. And so for some people, they want to. Some of them just feel the social pressure of they think their dog has to go to daycare, but some people are like, I want to. I want to go to the dog park. Okay, well, it's going to be a lot easier if your dog is spayed or neutered to do that. So just know that you should wait until they're fully grown. And so with a mastiff, that might be like 4, 3 and a bit. For a lab, that might be 18 months old. It's a long time. And so at some
Mhm.
point, you got to stop taking them to daycare once they start getting humpy and whatever, unless the daycare is cool and they can manage it, especially with the boys, and the disposition of the dog. But for some people, it is the right decision, and do it. But just know that supplements exist. You can go to your vet and ask for some synthetic supplements like Simplex M for boys, for males, and Simplex F for females. There are options, but no testosterone, no estrogen is not healthy.
Yeah, you made some really good points there. And you also mentioned play. You emphasize training should be fun and entertaining. There's some trainers that criticize the idea of fun as less serious. How do you balance this lighthearted style with effective discipline?
Yeah, it is less serious. I've got a little thing over there. I wish it was on the other side. It says, it's my whole doggy style motto that says, why so serious? And so it also says, get clear, stay focused, and have fun. So you can be clear and focused as to what your goal is and what your objective is. But yeah, it's just you don't have to be. I think people think serious is synonymous with angry or loud, or
Right. Yeah.
and you can be, um now when you're disciplining your dog, I think you should be real about it, but then that moment is over. Like if I'm pissed off at my dog, which some people are like, oh my god, how could you ever be angry at this perfect little angel? Okay, well, you and I are different, and I think my dog's an ass sometimes. He acts in a way that is a bit of an ass. I don't really like it, but I don't think my dog is a bad creature. I'm just mad at him in this moment because he did something that I don't like and I don't want to have in my household. And then it's done. And then it's over. And then we're back to like being good. But I don't want to be fake with my dogs either. So it's about having balance and being real with people, and also realizing that like we're not all going to have the same opinion about things. So how I am with my dogs and how if you want to be like mean, angry, serious, 100% militant dog trainer, okay, fine. There's people out there that want that. I like to be silly and have pink and purple, and my background is loud, and
Mhm.
so that's who I am, and I like to not take things so seriously, and it's coming out naturally in how I am with my dogs now. Need them to know all the things, but I don't need them to do all the things all the time. So, like, I don't place my dog for an hour. I just don't really see the need for that. Like, long duration stuff is cool and fun ish, but it's very unnatural for a dog, and I don't do a lot of that anymore. But they still need to know go lay down means I need you to do this thing right now. And then as I'm teaching it, should be really fun, but there's going to come a time where the dog doesn't want to do it, and I need to be more serious and maybe use a little bit of body pressure, a little bit of verbal pressure, getting back to that whole respect thing. I think body pressure exercises are amazing for developing respect, because you got to ask yourself, what kind of respect am I asking for? Is it respect of my space? Is it respect of what I asked you to do? Is it respect of this thing is mine and it's not yours? And so, but in the teaching process, why do we have to be angry when we don't?
Right.
Just have fun, and put on, your favorite music, unless it's like, I mean, I guess you can have fun with Tupac, but, like, it's, you know, put on some salsa or put on some, any of the Latin stuff, could be pretty fun, and just, lighten up a little bit.
Yeah, dance with the dogs, have some fun. I think that's a good way of looking at it. The training portion should be fun. And you made another good point with with which was how people look at the word serious and then they think that just means I need to be strict. You could be serious and still be playful at the same time.
Yep,
You could have goals and still make it fun while being serious about the goals that you want to achieve. And then in day-to-day application, I may not have the same goofy, fun energy that I might have in a training session
yep,
because maybe we're somewhere and I need to have the dog go into a down and I could be a little bit more serious there. But that doesn't translate into aggression or anger or dominating.
yep.
I think having the playful mentality is also important because that energy does transfer over to the dog. I've had multiple clients in the past where just the way that they would say their marker words or the way that they would praise would have the opposite effect. The praise wouldn't be a high pitch, happy praise. It would be a good boy. That's a good boy. And I'm like, okay, you need to get some more energy. You need to be more exciting because that's pretty boring.
Yeah,
And we can see that have an effect on your dog. So I think having the play mentality just in general is also going to make the experience more fun. It's
yeah.
something I used to say all the time when I was at the Tom Rose School as an instructor there. Before the students would go and test any of their routines, I would always remind them, remember, dog training's supposed to be fun. And this leads me to the next question. What is the next thing that we can expect to see from you?
So, working on a few things. I'm working on a system, kind of like a playful card set to help people with their dogs, and something I'm really excited about. I'm putting out more YouTube content. I've got a reactivity course coming out soon, and I've got a whole series of puppets over there, dog puppets, that my kids and my two boys, Noah and Isaac, the plan is to create more content. It'll probably be a separate page. We'll figure out whatever it's called. If you have suggestions, write them to evan@doggettstyle.com. But or topics or things with kids and dogs, to kind of put out more information, some good information out there for kids in a playful way that will help them understand their own dogs and their relationship with the dogs. Things like, it's not a good idea to go up and snuggle your dog while they're sleeping or while they're eating, but make it in a way that the kids will learn the lesson, and still have fun.
And we always want to make the training fun and rewarding. Where's the best place for our audience to reward themselves with more of your content?
I'm the only Doggett style, DOGGETT style.com, or any of the social medias.
And all those links, as always, will be in the description of this video. And remember, everyone, the journey is better when you and your dog walk it side by side. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.
Know what you're loved. Bye, meow.